All right, Mayor Peck, we are live.
Thank you. Welcome, and I'd like to call the December 14th, 2021 Longmont City Council regular session to order. And for our public, these meetings are being held remotely due to the ongoing novel coronavirus pandemic. You can watch the meeting live stream at bit.ly/Longmont YouTube Live or at the longmontpublicmedia.org/watch. Can we have the roll call, please, Dawn?
Absolutely, Mayor Peck. Mayor Peck is present. Councilmember Hidalgo-Fahring.
Here.
Councilmember Martin.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Here.
Councilmember Waters.
Here.
Councilmember Yarbrough.
Here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's say the Pledge of Allegiance. So I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So as a message to the public, anyone wishing to provide public comment during public invited to be heard must watch the live stream of the meeting and call in only when I open the meeting for public comment. You can see this on your screen at the moment. Callers are not able to access the meeting at any other time. The toll-free number is 888-788-0099. Watch for the instructions to be displayed and write down the meeting ID when it's displayed at the beginning of the meeting. So let's move on right to the approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the November 30th, 2021 minutes?
I'll move approval.
Can we get a second?
I'll second.
Who was that? I'm sorry.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Let's vote. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed? That carries unanimously. Do I have a motion for the December 7th, 2021 regular session minutes?
I'll move those as well. Move approval of those as well.
Thank you, Tim. And Shiquita, thank you. So that has been moved by Councilor Waters and seconded by Councilor Yarbrough. Let's vote, please. Raise your hands for those in favor. Those opposed? That passes unanimously. Dawn, do we have any agenda revisions or submission of documents?
We do not, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilors, do we have any motions to direct the city manager to add agenda items to future agendas? Councilor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. Last meeting, we appointed applicants to boards and commissions. Every time we go through that process, we have some conversation about ways to improve, tweak, kind of reconceptualize process. And I'd like to move. I'm going to offer a motion with some direction, with the understanding that what would come back to the council would be a plan on which we would vote then. All I would like to do is to get this plan in front of us. And the motion is this, that we direct staff to bring us back a process and timeline for the appointment of boards and commission members that would start with interviews being conducted by boards and commission continuing members of boards and commissions with staff involvement, with recommendations coming to the council of those candidates who they are recommending to us to appoint. Our interviews would be of those people recommended by boards and commissions, which mean we would only interview as many members or as individuals as there were seats available, and then make appointments after our interviews of those candidates. So the motion is to bring that process back to us with a process to do it in a timeline for doing it for the appointments that would occur in June.
Okay, does anybody want to second that? I will, if no one wants to, so I second that motion. Councilor Waters, can I just restate that you would like to direct council to bring back a process and timeline for the boards and commissioner applicants to be interviewed by the boards and commissions for which they are applying?
Correct.
Okay. So I second that. All those, do we have any discussion on that? No. All those in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? That passes unanimously. So let's go on to city manager's report. Harold, do you have a report for us on COVID?
Yes, Mayor, I do. If you will give me a second to share my screen. Do you all see the little COVID?
Yes.
Yep. Oh, and I just lost something here. There we go. So we did have our administrators meeting today, and want to talk a little bit about, you can see the points that they're talking about here. One of the things that they spend a lot of time on today, and you'll see some other slides on this, is really the impact of the healthcare system and the strain that they're continuing to face. And you'll see that in the numbers that we talk about later. And they're still really in crisis standards of care as they continue to move forward. And so we spent a lot of time talking about that in the administrator group. And I guess, you know, the key component in this is, as folks continue to look forward in terms of, you know, different county orders and things like that, what I wanted you to know is that they're really starting to look at the healthcare system and how is that informing different strategies. And so at the next meeting, I think they are going to talk to us about some of that in more specifics. What they're trying to reconcile is what really is the impact if we have an order in Boulder County and we don't have one in Jefferson. How does that impacting it? And isn't it making a difference? Because they're showing us some data. And I'm going to ask them to join us at the next meeting that we have that really shows how some of these orders, you're seeing tangible differences in terms of number of cases and hospitalizations. If you remember when we met with Boulder County Public Health Friday afternoon, and they showed you the example of Larimer County, where they were pretty high on hospitalizations. And then once they implemented their masking orders, their hospitalizations dropped even more. They're following that and they're continuing to see that trend. And so they're really working through all of these issues. So as we go back to the beginning of this, and we said it's really all about the hospitals, that's what the conversation is. It's really all about the hospitals and where they're sitting. In terms of cases, you can see where we went down, we popped up, we're down again. I think there is, again, optimism and some hope that we can continue trending, but when you see our wastewater, you will have a sense of what that's going to look like or what we can expect in the future. But we're really sort of just hanging out in that zone, relatively stable. Again, we're still in high transmission in Colorado, and this slide actually I think changed at one point this afternoon based on what I heard, but still in high transmission. Boulder County, you know, outside on this list outside of Bear Creek, we're still performing above most of the other counties in the metro area. You can see the case trends. You can see how they dropped and then how they peaked a little bit and then how they leveled out. That's really relating to the data that we're seeing in that flattening of the cases. And then when we look at race and ethnicity, you know, this is kind of this 18%, 17% is really where we like to be. But once again, when we talk about where the predominant number of cases are, we can see that Longmont is still the bulk of the cases in Boulder County. And so when you look at that compared to the race and ethnicity graph, because our Latinx population is larger in Boulder, in Longmont than it is in the other communities in Boulder County, that's where we're seeing that connection point there and why that can be higher. This is our wastewater numbers. And so this is what we've really been watching. And again, if you look at this slide and you kind of see what's happening with this, you can see that the cases in blue are really following that trend. And you can just see the same movements lagging our wastewater numbers. And so you can see on this point where we were really hopeful that we were going to continue on that downward trend, and then it popped back up. and then we're here. So we're waiting to really see what happens. And this is with the 7-day time lag. So you can see here's the cases that are reported, and here's the wastewater results that we're seeing. In terms of that, what I wanted to let you know is that Casey Campo, who's been working on this, sent an email to us today and really talked about how they are working with CSU and testing the Omicron variant. GT Molecular, they're in the final steps of getting that in their testing protocol. In terms of the testing on the Omicron variant, what they are saying from the state is I think they're going to report those results every 2 weeks, not every week like we're seeing some of the others. I think GT Molecular, once they actually get that going, will be reporting on a more frequent basis. So hopefully in the near future, we'll start seeing that. So now let's talk about the healthcare system and what I started off with. The average number of hospitalized confirmed COVID-19 patients stayed relatively the same this week compared to the previous week. ICU beds, we were down to 3%, down from 4% last week. What I want to talk about here is that it changes daily. So literally on Tuesday, when I gave you all the presentation, I give the same presentation twice a month to the city staff. And I think there were 8 beds available at that presentation, or there was, let's say, 5 to 8. When I presented on Thursday, there was actually only 1 bed available. And so that's how this is moving on the hospitals in terms of what they're dealing with. Staffed med surge beds, again, that's down from 4 to 3%. This is the key piece, it's the reporting the tight staffing. So you're continuing to see that change. And so, now it was 50% last week, it's 63% this week. And so when we really talk about that, you may have beds, but if you don't have the staff there, then you can't really count that bed. And I know that Marika sent you all a link to the Boulder County Health Board meeting that they had yesterday. And that was the basis for a lot of these conversations. And so I would encourage you, and I would encourage the members of our community to go to the Boulder County website and really watch that video, because they had some medical providers come in and really talk about what they were seeing and what we can do to help the hospitals. Again, you can see that pediatric confirmed cases holding steady. And once again, the pharmacy piece. That was new before, and it's still holding. So this is what it looks like in terms of hospitalization. So you can see how we've just been climbing. It has been steadily decreasing, so we're hoping that that's the case. And let me go back a little bit. So when I showed you the wastewater, 99% of the cases we're seeing of the testing that we're doing is still showing the Delta variant. The projection is that eventually the Omicron variant will be the predominant variant because of how contagious it is. So when we go back to this slide, you can see what's really happening in hospitals. So even though we decreased, we're still at a pretty high level compared to where we were. To kind of put this in perspective, if you remember in November and December when we talked about this, we were talking about 90 being a level of hospital admits a year ago, where that was really high. And you can see that we've surpassed that at times. But the fact that we're still at 70, and you put it in perspective in terms of the hospitalizations that we're seeing related to the fact that the vaccine is there, we're still pretty high. And same with the staffed ICU beds. And again, you can see the difference in these slides and how that number is moving. Again, this information is provided by Boulder County Public Health. You can see where we are in the epi capacity, still really in that same position. And then, the one thing that we did also talk about is, again, just the number of deaths that we're continuing to see. When you look at some of the health data, and if you go and listen to that presentation for the Board of Health, what you're really going to hear is it is a predominantly, when you see who's hospitalized and who's not hospitalized, it's related to the vaccine component. The other thing is those that are unvaccinated tend to be older. There was a really good graph that I was trying to get from the meeting today, but it was a shaded graph that really highlighted the difference in hospitalizations and who was being hospitalized and why. And same on the deaths. You can see the positivity rate is going down. Again, to kind of give you a sense of the numbers, we averaged, if you remember last week, we averaged about 1,900 tests per day. The previous week, we were at about 1,600 tests per day. Now we're averaging about 2,000 tests per day versus the 1,900. So we're seeing the number of tests increasing. We think that that is due to a number of things. One, what we're obviously hearing and the messages that are being put out regarding the need to test. Two, a number of employers have implemented similar requirements like we have that said that if you're not vaccinated, you're going to be tested weekly, really following the protocols that were established by the CDC. So we're seeing that number go up, and we're seeing what's happening in terms of the positivity rate. So we're going to continue to watch this data set to really see if it proves out what we were thinking. Again, vaccinations can continue to move in the right direction in terms of what we're seeing. Again, total Boulder County residents that have received at least one dose, 84.5. The 68.5 on the 2 doses is again because of the now opening up a larger category of folks who are qualified. And then when we look at the percent of the eligible population, you can see the difference in where we are there. So they are really starting to once again focus on the social equity component and really work with our BIPOC populations, especially for younger children. And so you can see a focus coming from public health there. And then again, this is what we're seeing in terms of the uptake on the booster doses. So yellow is the percent receiving a booster fully vaccinated. The blue is receiving a booster of the total population. And so, Mayor, Council, that is my presentation today. Again, I would strongly encourage everyone to check that link out from Boulder County Public Health, because I think that'll answer a lot of questions that I'm not able to answer, but I'll be happy to do my best right now.
Do we have any questions from council for Harold? Harold, thank you so much for that and for keeping us updated on this. It's very important that we know what's going on, and you do a good job. So thank you for that.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. We do have a special report tonight. It's going to be on Sugar Mill and the STEAM sub-area plan. Who's going to give us that update?
Good evening, Mayor Peck, council members.
Hi, Aren. Thank you.
And I'll ask Dallas to go ahead and pull up the presentation while I'm just making some quick opening remarks. This is the presentation under 7A. Thanks, Dallas. So for those of you that I haven't met, my name's Aren Fosdick, and I'm a principal planner with the planning division. I want to mention that tonight I'm also joined by Tony Chacon, our redevelopment manager, Glenn Van Nimwegen, the planning director, as well as some members of our consultant team who you'll meet here in just a second. We're really pleased to be able to present information tonight to council as we kick off the sub-area planning for the Sugar Mill and STEAM area. We did provide some preliminary information as an info item in your November 16th packet, but we're excited to be able to be here sort of live tonight to present to you. We know that this project is a council and a community priority, and we're really excited to be partnering with a dynamic consultant team that's led by Stantec. And tonight they're going to provide a high-level overview of the project, including opportunities and challenges, market information, and some additional thoughts on our engagement strategy. So with that, I'll go ahead and introduce Rhonda Bell, who's a senior associate with Stantec and the staff member that's managing the project for our consultant team. And we will go ahead and get started. And Rhonda, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and start your video, you can start the presentation.
Aren, give us just a minute.
Thanks.
Fantastic. Looks like I'm on both audio and video. Thank you, Aren. Dallas, if you could go to the next slide. I think Aren covered what we're going to talk about with you tonight. So who we are, what we're aiming to do, and kind of where we are preliminarily. Next slide, please. So as Aren said, I'm Rhonda and I'm the project manager with Stantec. I am joined by Nancy Locke, also from Stantec, who is leading the planning and urban design on the project. Also with us is Danica Powell from the Trestle Strategy Group, who's leading our public participation, and David Starnes, who I think may be familiar to some of you with Civistruct, and he is both updating a recent market study and adding a residential component to that, and both of them will give us a summary. Next slide, please. So the project area is outlined in pink on this map. And as you can see, it includes both what you may have heard discussed as the steam area on the west side of the map, and then the sugar mill area over on the east side of Martin Street. And I do want to emphasize that this is the sugar mill and steam plan. We're not doing two separate plans. We really are looking at both of these areas together, stronger together, and how we can connect the development and make both areas stronger. We are scoped. The project will look at opportunities and challenges and how we can get some creative ideas to mitigate those. Urban design and the character of the area. Connections. This is a hard one. We'll talk about this a little bit later on, how you get into and move around the area, both locally and regionally. And then once we've kind of got our preferred plan and what we think is the best options to move forward, how that should be phased from both the public side and the private side, and then of course the infrastructure that we need to support new development in the area. Next slide, please. We do have draft goals. And again, these are draft goals. We like to make goals to kind of give food for thought for people to react to instead of creating them from scratch. So we have 5 buckets up here that you can see. And we would be open to input both from council tonight or later, and we're going to take these goals out to the community to get input on these. Our emphasis in housing is really attainable housing as opposed to strictly affordable, so that we have a whole range of products. Transportation, as I said, looking at not just local study area, but local and regional, kind of tying into the urban fabric of the entire city. Development-wise, we want to ensure that we're connected across Steam and Sugar Mill into the community, and that we're complementing other development projects that are going on. Community-wise, incentivizing some cultural arts facilities and innovation, and then sustainability. This is a great, huge development opportunity that we can maybe demonstrate some projects that wouldn't be possible in smaller development projects going on in the city. Next slide. From a context point of view, this is a big one. If you look at the names that are pointed out on the map and the 36 names that are on the top of the screen, together we have about 60 owners in the entire study area, and that's 60 property owners. In addition to those, there's also a number of developers or other interests who have options to purchase land, so that they are also very, very interested stakeholders in addition to the community at large. We already held a meeting on December 1st with pretty much the eastern portion of the study area, east of Martin, to kind of just pick people's brains and get them talking to each other. Concerns, opportunities, start that conversation. And then we're planning a similar meeting on the east side, kind of the Steam area, the west side, west of Martin. And that meeting is set to take place on January 7th. Next slide. Context, you can see there are quite a few current projects going on, both in the study area and adjacent to it, and I'm sure that you are familiar with most of these projects. In addition, the 2 kind of ovoids that we have marked in there with purple dashed lines, those are 2 active pre-applications within the study area, and both of those are for multifamily and mixed-use development. Next slide. So opportunities, this represents our initial analysis since we are just getting started. First and foremost, a tremendous amount of prior work in the study area and nearby it. And some of that is ongoing, as you can see, recent and even further back. And all of these are important in giving us kind of ideas that were generated, as well as marking what the community really wants. It's like the Main Street Corridor Plan to pull into the study area. Things to keep in mind what's important as we look at different options for the study area. Fantastic opportunity as a gateway to Longmont, historically and just physically from its location for visual entry features. We mentioned housing when we talked about goals, and then open space. this is a tremendous parcel, you know, with adjacency both to the St. Vrain River corridor and the open spaces that are there. There may also be an interesting opportunity with the mining that is planned to take place in the near term, just south of the study area, and that'll be restored. That might be an opportunity for aggregated open space that that can benefit the development and possibly even allow higher density in the development. And then, as I hinted at, again, giant redevelopment area, pilot projects and best practices. This is could be a great laboratory to try out some ideas or demonstrate some ideas that the city has already adopted into policy that they're interested in carrying forward. And complete streets, green infrastructure, those are examples of some of those. Next slide, please. And of course, we're not without challenges. And anybody who's been to the study area knows, first and foremost, access is really difficult, both getting into, out of, and moving through the area. Some of those issues have to do with signalization, possible extension of existing streets from the north into the study area. We're aware of some safety issues at some major intersections abutting the study area. And then, of course, really, like I said before, connecting the two, I don't want to say the two halves, the two sides of Martin. So that is, it really feels like a single development that's greater than the sum of its parts. The railroad crossings are challenging. We know that there was one that was recently upgraded on the west side in the Steam area. There are some existing additional crossings in the sugar mill area. Some questions that we'd be looking at is, can we relocate railroad crossings? Can we realign them? And most importantly, when does realigning them become a relocation? So some sticky issues there. Open space and river access that I talked about before, and then environmentally, it bears saying that none of the development, redevelopment, revitalization in the study area will take place before there's some mitigation, particularly over on the sugar mill side. So the phase 2 environmental analysis was recently completed, and a brownfields grant was just submitted on December 1st. And that grant is for planning remediation. It's not for the actual remediation itself. And then there are additional floodplain issues on a significant portions of the property. Next slide, please. With that, I'm going to turn it over to David to tell us, I believe David is nearing the end of his market update, and tell you where he is right now and some of the initial conclusions. David? That's David Starnes, Dallas, if you need to unmute him.
Hello?
David, we can hear you.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor Peck and Council. I'm here to provide a brief update on the kind of some preliminary market observations that will be used to help inform the land use plan for the Steam and Sugar Mill area. And I want to highlight on a couple of things. One, in terms of there's some pretty significant demographic shifts happening nationally and here in Colorado and regionally that really will have implications for housing moving forward and the types of housing moving forward. Number one is our aging households and households without children will be the kind of primary drivers of housing going forward. And as you may know, these types of typologies of households have different housing preferences than, for example, a single family house. You may not need a large house with a large yard, which provides opportunities for kind of that missing middle and alternative housing types. Interestingly, according to the Denver Regional Council of Governments, 82% of the increased demand in housing in the Denver region through 2050 will be from households without children, and more than half of all forecasted household growth will be among households headed by older adults. And again, these have different housing implications in terms of the types of houses they prefer, whether it's to buy or to rent, that will impact Longmont, as well as the Sugar Mill and Steam area for potential housing opportunities. In terms of the implications to Longmont, as I mentioned, this will result in kind of an increase in demand for more diversified housing stock, not only single family, but also what we call this missing middle, which can include townhomes, duplexes, triplexes, stacked flats, apartments, kind of that for rent or for own opportunity that's more attainable in price than, say, a single family home. As you probably know, in Boulder County, the prices for single family home is increasingly out of reach for most of us here. Another important trend to note is that's happening nationally and locally over the next couple of decades, what we call decelerating growth. In Longmont, from past 40 years, from 1980 to 2020, we grew about 2.1% annually in our population. That's expected to decrease fairly significantly over the next couple of decades. This is because of fewer births, more deaths as households age, slower in-migration compared to previous decades, and so forth. And according to the State Demography Office, in-migration will be the primary driver of population growth in the Boulder and Colorado area through 2050 versus natural increase, which includes birth and deaths, which are expected to slow dramatically over the next couple of decades. So obviously with Colorado and Boulder being a desirable place, including Longmont, that will be the primary driver of population growth moving forward. And of course, this also depends in terms of the housing units, the availability of land within Longmont to accommodate this growth, and whether that land is appropriately zoned to accommodate housing of diversified types. Next slide, please. In terms of the economy, as you well know, we're slowly working our way out of this pandemic. I mean, we have fits and starts. The recovery is gaining momentum, but there are headwinds that continue to threaten growth. As you may be aware, obviously inflation is at all-time highs. We're experiencing labor shortages in major different types of businesses and markets, and we're still continuing to deal with supply chain issues in terms of products and delivery here in Longmont as well as in the nation. Moving forward into 2022, the major economic drivers for Colorado, and this I think bodes well for Longmont, will be continue to be manufacturing, data centers, biopharmaceuticals, aerospace, and warehousing in terms of the e-commerce. We believe Longmont's well positioned with this concentration in these target industries to kind of continue to capture this growth. In terms of housing, if you look at the exhibit to the right, I think this is fairly interesting. This is the ratio of Longmont's housing units to households. And over the past 40 years, Colorado has averaged about 1.1 housing units to households. As you can see here in Longmont, for the past 40 years, we haven't, and again, the 1.1 there's no magic number or no magic ratio. This is just what has been actual based on State Demography Office information. We actually hit that 1.1 in this past decade from 2010 to 2020, but from 1980 to 2010, our ratio was below that 1.1, which would suggest that we're not building enough housing units to meet the demand for household formation. Again, in terms of housing growth, it has slowed statewide over the past decade. Longmont did better. And then moving forward, it's really going to be that regional employment growth that will be driving the demand for housing. We're experiencing record low inventories and record price increases that are contributing to the challenging housing market in Longmont. Next slide, please. And in terms of the implications for the steam and sugar mill area, kind of some initial observations that will be fine-tuned as we finalize kind of our analysis, but really providing meeting this housing demand in terms of the demographic shifts with a mix of housing types and tenure options is going to be important. Diverse housing options, obviously Longmont is not moving outward as it has historically in terms of annexations. It's more it's going to be more of this infill development opportunities that are going to be the primary location to accommodate this growing housing demand and to accommodate this demographic shift in terms of aging households and households without children for more compact, medium to high density housing, which we expect to continue to grow, and that we feel that the steam and sugar mill area is well positioned to kind of capture this demand as part of a mixed use community. The missing middle has been talked about before. This is kind of that attainable housing. It's not primarily single family detached. It's more of the single family attached units, duplexes, triplexes, stacked flats, ADUs. Again, housing that can be for rent or for sale that's at a lower price point and more attainable to households of different income levels. As I mentioned before, affordability issues abound. Developers today are really struggle with increasing construction costs, finding labor in terms of framers, electricians, and having them be available. increasing land costs, particularly in places like Boulder County and here in Longmont, where there's not land available, state and local regulations, the ability to get projects entitled in a timely manner to be able to build to meet this housing demand, and then pricing. These are identified as really top real estate development issues and headwinds moving forward. And then the last piece is, again, to buy or to rent. I just want to kind of throw that out there. There is a continued issue of affordability, but there is continued growing demand for a for-rent product. And this can be renters by choice, but also renters by need. And this includes older residents and younger residents who prefer more of a fuss-free, flexible lifestyle. This will continue to drive demand for medium to high density residential, including apartments and for rent townhomes as well. Next slide, please. And my last slide here is switching from the housing, but looking at kind of the commercial market, looking at industrial, office, and retail. The pandemic has shown really some divergent outlooks for Longmont, as well as the country's real estate market by product type. And you look at industrial, that's been what we call the favored asset class through this pandemic. It's experiencing robust demand, scarcity to supply, accelerated rents. And this is being primarily driven by the continued rise of e-commerce and that kind of last mile delivery in terms of warehouse demand. We think Longmont continues to be well positioned in terms of the e-commerce demand and really focusing on this smaller scale flex warehouse with R&D and life sciences, which is another emerging niche here in Boulder Boulder County for space. Looking at adaptive reuse of existing buildings, many of Longmont's existing buildings are pretty outdated. They're really not conducive or attractive to what modern businesses want today. And the ability to update this space to be modern, to attract potential spillover demand from Boulder is an opportunity that Longmont should continue to look at. In terms of office, as we probably all know, we're all going through the great reset here in terms of where can we work and how can we work and work from anywhere. I guess one of the major expectations of what we think moving forward, and again, there's a lot of prognosticators out there looking at, everyone's coming back to the office, some people aren't, is that I think people are confidently saying that there will be less office demand expected moving forward, particularly with the hybridization of the office space, working 3 days in the office, 2 days at home, or 2 days at home and 3 days in office, is showing that, moving forward, there will be some expected less demand for actual physical square feet of office space. We think Longmont's pretty well positioned. They talked about kind of the growth to the smaller, vibrant suburban communities versus bigger urban downtowns. And Longmont, I think, with our location in Boulder County and the Denver region and the Front Range, is well positioned to kind of capitalize on this growth to smaller, vibrant communities. And then retail, retail did experience some pretty significant headwinds with the pandemic. It has revived, but hasn't recovered yet. And again, changes continue to accelerate in how retail operators make their businesses work well. You have the impact of e-commerce. You have BOPIS, which is buy online, pick up in store. What you're seeing is some of these retailers have these little micro fulfillment centers on their back office of their store to accommodate to kind of pick up in store. Again, with Longmont, opportunity to again focus on these micro fulfillment centers. Experiential retail is critical. I think with the steam and sugar mill, we've been talking about as potential with this agri-hub, taking advantage of Longmont's agricultural history, food and beverage, and really focusing on neighborhood serving and retail. And I guess moving forward, I guess two key themes that they've been talking about in terms of the kind of real estate market is the importance of flexibility and convenience that will be driving the next decade in terms of how we work, where we work, and how we shop. And with that, that's all I have at this point. Thank you.
Dallas, if you could unmute Danica Powell, she's going to cover the last part of our presentation on engagement.
Danica, you should be good to go.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Mayor Peck and Council and the Longmont community. A key part of this project is stakeholder engagement and public participation. As we've mentioned, it's a very large and diverse area, so we've adapted our community engagement strategy to respond to that. So what we want to do in this phase of community engagement is understand the community's needs and interests, build on what's already underway, what's been studied and what we already know from other engagement practices. Engage all affected stakeholders, which is the broader community at large, to have an inclusive approach, and encourage and incorporate that community and stakeholder input to shape the final plan. Next slide. So in order to do that, we have a short, this project is not a lengthy project. So we are really working at putting our engagement out there. So right now we've been getting the word out. So that includes articles and publications, the newspaper. Rhonda mentioned the developers meeting that we had on the east side of the study area, which we will continue with the west side. We had a presentation or a board at the Longmont Lights, and we're launching Engage Longmont page. So really just letting people know what the study is, what the goals are, what it isn't. It's not a rezoning effort. It's not a redevelopment effort. And really just getting people socialized around the idea of this study and that this is an area of change and getting feedback. In the beginning of next year, we'll be really doing targeted informational and feedback meetings. So really this is kind of the first of those, going to City Council, then to Planning and Zoning, and through the different boards and commissions that have interest in this project. Also, at the same time, we'll be working on more focused outreach with groups that have interests pertaining to the issues we've identified and the opportunities. So environmental advocates, sustainability, housing, and other stakeholders. And in March and April, we'll be really bringing all our alternatives and ideas out to the community, and also doing this really deep dive with youth engagement, partnering with Growing Up Boulder, and doing engagement, micro engagement leading up to a larger activity in the springtime, where we'll be able to partner with several Longmont institutions and the street fair, and really doing really tangible, concrete planning activities with the community. So all of this, our goal is to do really great targeted personal engagement, micro engagement, pop-ups, and while utilizing the city's tools that are already in place to let people know that this is happening. Next slide. So right now we have a project page on the city's website. You can see here on the right, and we're launching it's actually been launched. There's basic information on the project on Engage Longmont, and we'll be putting up activities. And hopefully in the past, we've been able to reach some larger diversity through the Engage Longmont site, as well as through our pop-up activities. Next slide. And with that, I'll pass it back to the team for questions and discussion.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments from council on this project? Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. First of all, just a couple of comments real quick. I personally have made comments previously to planning and development that I don't agree with combining the Steam and the sugar mill sub areas. I think they're very different neighborhoods, specifically that they have very different access points. And Martin has always kind of been in a dividing line. And I think it also is the antithesis of having more localized, walkable neighborhoods that are a little bit more contained to promote not getting in our cars and driving everywhere. So I don't really agree with including them together. The other thing I'd like to comment on is that the missing middle to me doesn't include rental housing. Everything we talked about in this last campaign over the number of years, over this last year, has been more based upon the fact that we've been building a lot of apartment buildings and a lot of very large apartment buildings throughout town, and that we're not building enough for sale properties. So to me, that's the true missing middle, at least in the concept of what Longmont is looking for. And it still is the same thing as far as duplexes, triplexes, attached housings, condominiums, I assume that's what stacked flats means in this concept. And I think that you've seen that in the market as far as the rental prices have increased in our market over the last year or so, but they have not increased at the same level as for sale housing has increased. So I don't quite agree with that look at the missing middle as was previously stated in this. And I think that will also come up on a later agenda item tonight that we'll probably be talking about. But as such, I'm very much for the steam aspect of it a lot more than I am for the sugar mill, partially based on the fact that the city of Longmont has much more land at its disposal versus private developers in the steam section versus the sugar mill section. And so those are my concerns with this. I feel it's also traveling at a very brisk pace that to me seems maybe a little premature. At the end of the day, though, obviously I'd like to see the sugar mill redeveloped or that piece of land. I just think it should be a very different concept than something that's more closely connected to the rest of downtown, for instance. I think that provides different opportunities for density and for commercial and for academic possibilities such as annexes and for the hotel restaurant concept versus what would potentially go in more in the sugar mill section. That's why I just don't think connecting them makes a lot of sense to me. And I've stated this before, but it's just a reiteration. Thank you.
Councillor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. Maybe just as I listen to Mayor Pro Tem, I appreciate the concerns, and he certainly has a sharp perspective on both the history and the whole process for land use. The one thing I might disagree a little bit with is timing. Especially if I were to bifurcate the sugar mill area from the steam area, I'd like to see us pick up the pace, at least in the steam area, with what comes next in terms of the kind of the work that this project is going to address. Especially since we have a number of other things kind of going to hang in the balance. That'll be tough to make decisions on what to do with a feasibility study for a performing arts and conference center, other development opportunities, if we don't move forward, at least on the steam area. And with that thought in mind, the one question I have for the team, in the steam, one of the products, a deliverable, if you will, from the STEAM project was what was intended to be a collection of narratives that would describe the vision or elements of the vision that the team that did that work developed over the period of a number of months in 2019. That document resides or is hosted or posted on the Engage Longmont site. There are actually 8 categories in which the narratives were to have been developed. If you go and look at them, some are pretty well developed narratives, some are more like bulleted lists of ideas, but 8 areas, kind of 7 pretty well specified areas, from transportation to land use to building type to architecture, and then a kind of a catch-all of all other issues, along with a preamble that made a statement of value prior to the narratives that 8 teams worked on. And I'm just curious, is any attention being given for this consulting team? I know I heard the presentation that other work that's been done from the Main Street corridor to STEAM to other planning processes are being considered. I'd hate to see this move forward without at least acknowledging the work that group did and answer to the question when asked, and I hope we are asked, so what are you doing with the results of that work we did in 2019? Who's paying attention, if any, to any of the ideas? Not that those were the only ideas. It was a starter discussion more than anything else to move this forward. But there were some pretty interesting and robust and exciting ideas that were developed. What kind of attention or considerations being given to any of that work? Specifically, what's posted on the Engage Longmont page.
Mayor
That's
Peck,
not a
Councilmember
rhetorical
Waters.
question. I'd like an answer. Yes. Thank you, Aaron.
I'll start, and then I obviously would invite the project team to weigh in. As Rhonda mentioned in the presentation, a lot of work has been done, and I think a big body of that work for the STEAM area is the work that council championed pre-pandemic. And so we have given the consultant access to all of the materials that advisory panel came up with, including those narratives, the drawings, the notes. I was fortunate enough to listen in on some of those discussions, so have a little bit of prior knowledge. But yes, absolutely, that's the basis for a lot of the work that we're picking up with, kind of to use the phrase, building steam on. So yes, that's absolutely work that we're taking a look at. Those stakeholders that were involved in that process did spend, and you yourself spent an incredible amount of time on that. So we certainly don't want to lose sight of that. We also have linked that project on the Engage site to this new project. So folks can go back and sort of pick up those breadcrumbs and see the work that council and the community had done in the STEAM area. So that's absolutely being factored in as sort of a starting point, similar to what we're looking at with some of the other plans that Rhonda mentioned in her presentation. This isn't a planning effort that's starting from scratch. We are able to build on what we've heard from the community, what we've heard from property owners and stakeholders, what we've already heard from council. And so you're spot on. We're using that information. The consultant team has that, and we're still keeping a live link to that through the project pages on Engage. And Rhonda, I don't know if you or anyone else on the team want to add to that.
I can. In a more concrete answer as well, we do have that meeting coming up on January 7th for property owners and interests in the STEAM area and the area west of Martin. And I think that's a great opportunity to kind of fact check, I don't know, I shouldn't say fact check, but talk about those profiles that you described and see if what changed, if people have more specific ideas. And I don't know at this time if the participants in that STEAM visioning effort, how that compares with the invite list for that January 7th meeting, but we will definitely put that on our list to compare those invite lists. So we know do we have 90% of the same people? It would be great if we had maybe 50% of the same people and 50% new people, so that we can get even more opinions on, did we get it right? What's nuanced? What has changed? And then move forward from there. I think I'm excited to have those there as a place to start instead of from zero. And then it also gives us information on how people's thinking has evolved, both over time and with the changing context.
I appreciate the response, and I would say full steam ahead.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Extending the ideas expressed by the Mayor Pro Tem and Dr. Waters, I have a couple of questions about this. The east and west of Martin seem to be very differentiated in terms of the number of unknowns we have about the parcels on each side of Martin. So, in the original study, the west of Martin area has been studied pretty hard. There is a lot of city property there. And it's sort of its fitness for the public amenities aspects of the project has been studied considerably. On the other hand, we have a lot of unknowns about the east side, especially we don't understand how much hazardous materials mitigation is going to have to be done. There is a property owners consortium, and you may be in the process of finding out, but certainly the council doesn't know what their vision is and whether it aligns with the public vision of STEAM. And then finally, I don't think we have a good idea what the transit vision is east to west. As the Mayor Pro Tem was saying, it's easy to envision either side as a walkable neighborhood. It's the right size. We need to understand how the east-west connectivity is supposed to work in order not to kind of shatter the unity of those neighborhood pockets, and get us into traffic situations. So I would really like to see a multimodal transit plan for an area this long and narrow, and what's really envisioned there.
Do we have any other comments? Or does Councillor Martin, did you want an answer from staff on this, or?
I suspect it's too soon to ask for an answer about the transit, but I would like to know what you know about the hazardous waste mitigation.
Mayor Peck, members of council, this is Tony Chacon. I can advise you that there has been environmental sampling going on at the sugar mill properties. That includes the historic buildings and the actual grounds that entail what Dick Thomas owns, and then that parcel is effectively an outdoor storage facility presently. They just concluded, or first of all, let me just say that the work actually was conducted by a group called TerraTech, which was consultant to the EPA. And the EPA was gracious enough to effectively pay for the cost of that assessment work. So they stepped forward. That phase 2 sampling has been more recently concluded. We anticipate having the results of that completed within the next 2 months, and possibly within the next 2-3 month period, we'll know what quantities of environmental contamination there are out there, which will then give us an idea of what needs to be remediated and some general cost ideas, what that remediation cost might be. So that effort has been running parallel with this planning effort. They're not part of the same endeavor, but that information is being fed to the Stantec consulting team as we go along in this planning process.
Thank you, Tony. Are you satisfied with that answer? Okay, great. I would like to chime in a little bit on this. I feel that we really do need to separate these two, the steam from the sugar mill, because housing is probably going to be the number one thing that we need. And it seems like the sugar mill site, this is just my opinion, would have more of a attraction, I guess, for middle range housing, and not to combine everything. I also would like to, even though I really appreciate David Starnes' input and his knowledge, I like to push back a little bit on the for sale. I don't know that we actually know. I know trends are what we follow, but in 18 years, are we really going to have such a mobile population that they would want to rent and not own and earn their own equity? And I don't like making those assumptions about people in advance. It would be nice to, some people would like to have control over growing their own equity in their home without having to depend upon rent all the time and not being able to control that rent. So whether it's townhouses, condominiums, single family, paired, whatever it is, I would like to see definitely some for sale units. So that's it. But I do know this is a longer process. I would love to have it all up in 6 months. It isn't going to happen. So as we walk through it and see a concept plan, it'll be easier to visualize what we're actually talking about. So thank you. And I really, really appreciate the community outreach. I think it's really important. So thanks for all of your work. Councillor Martin.
One question that I neglected to ask is, what was the basis for combining the two study areas? What was the thinking in terms of doing that?
Mayor Peck, Councilmember Martin, I'll take a shot at answering that, and certainly other city staff can jump in. That obviously these two areas are in proximity to each other. I think it is important to recognize that while we're looking at this as one one sub area plan, there are going to be different components in the steam and sugar mill. One of the things that I think Rhonda emphasized is really how do we knit these together? And so how do we create, to your point, that connectivity between the steam area and the sugar mill area, but also between the sugar mill and Mill Village, the sugar mill and areas to the north, and the sugar mill and steam to kind of the downtown core. So I think what I'm hearing from council is there's a little bit of a concern that we're trying to make one homogeneous plan for the whole area. And I don't think that's the case. We do want to look at opportunities and constraints sub area wide, but there is an opportunity to look at these specific character areas differently. The thinking behind combining them was it's a way to maximize our funding. You know, we can combine engagement, we can combine existing conditions, we can look at important things from a, you know, connectivity, floodplain, environmental remediation, things that both kind of sides of the site have in common. You know, and I think they're both priorities for the community and for council. The sugar mill is part of the East Highway 119 Gateway and Envision Longmont. It's one of 4 focus areas. One we haven't done a sub area plan for. That continues to be a priority for the community. And I think with the development that we've seen out east, there's a lot more increasing interest from developers. And we really felt like this is an opportune time to take a look at how we coordinate that from a city perspective. You know, what kinds of public investments do we need to be looking at as the private sector is making those investments? And so, you know, certainly we know STEAM is a priority for council, and we saw that as an opportunity to kind of combine these planning efforts. But I think what we're hearing you say tonight is it does make sense to take a look at those areas a little bit individually where it's appropriate. And I think that message came across loud and clear. I don't know, Harold, if you have anything you want to add of why we combined those, but I think, you know, efficiency was a big reason.
Yeah, I think it was, as Aren described, part of that is maximizing the dollars. Typically where I've seen this in other places, it's not that you come at it where it's one consolidated plan, but I tend to see it as 2 sub plans that you understand the interaction of the 2 together. I think what's really interesting about, and we've talked about this a little bit, what's really interesting about what we're seeing on the eastern part of our community right now, to the point is when they showed the slide, you actually saw 2 active development projects in that area where there's tangible interest in it. You combine that with the development that we've seen with the hospital, that we've seen with the housing development near there. They pointed out the Costco project. There's a lot of interest really starting to happen on that eastern part. And that's part of why we wanted to look at it. So we're ready for it. But we definitely hear council, and the way I see it personally, where I've dealt with this, is it's almost like you have a sugar mill plan, you have a steam plan, but you're understanding the linkages between that. And then to Aren's point, we also have to understand in that area how that's linking to the eastern part of our community. So I think that was what we were thinking, and I definitely hear what Mayor Pro Tem and the rest of council are saying on this.
I do.
Oh, we can talk and kind of work on that separation, but togetherness. Like you want to pull it apart, but keep it together enough so that they're in congruence with each other too. Well, I'll work with Aren on that.
Yeah, well, and I thank you both. I think that helps a lot.
Thank you. I do think for the people who are watching and have no idea what STEAM is, we should tell them what the acronym stands for. So do you want to tell us, Aren? I know what it is, but it's your planning department.
Yeah, Mayor Peck, I'll take a shot. And then if Councilmember Waters, I know it's a little unique to Longmont, science, technology, engineering, arts, and makerspace, I think, is what we refer to STEAM as. Typically, I think it's math in the original context, but I think we refer to it as maker. Is that correct?
Put another M on there for makerspace, mathematics and makerspace.
Yeah.
Yes, a couple of
2
M's.
M's. Okay, 2 M's. We got it.
Well, and Mayor and Council, I did want to kind of also, you know, when we talk about the STEAM concept, if you remember when we entered, we had representatives from universities in this.
That's right.
I think the other thing is reaching out to them also and understanding it, because they're going through change right now, and their model is shifting real time in terms of what they're looking at, and we see where office space is going. And if you I happen to have a kid in college right now, and just the opportunities for them to, frankly, go online in so many of their classes and what that's really going to look at. We need to be mindful also as we're looking at this and have conversations with them to talk about what is really the future of education and how that's going to look 10 years down the road. And maybe the answer is, how do we leverage our next light capability to really have rooms where, if my daughter's here and wants to go to her class in Texas when she's here visiting, there's rooms where they can come in and actually do that. And I think those are things, we're moving so fast right now as a world, and you're going to hear that on the employment side in about a month. Those are all things I think we're all trying to really understand and understand quickly.
Do we have any other comments from counselors for staff? Thank you very much, Aren. This is really exciting, actually, as we move and grow Longmont, and it's a huge project. I didn't see you, Counselor Hidalgo-Fahring.
I just realized that when it's the same color as the background, my hand, so you can't see it. So I'll have to paint my hand purple or something. But anyways, I was in a meeting it was last week with folks from different organizations, and it was Ann Macca from the museum who started it. And I believe that might have been, was Danica, were you there?
Yes, I was.
And that was
Growing Up Boulder convened that meeting that you were at. Yes,
that's who it was. And so we had different representatives. I spoke a little bit in my council capacity as well as an educator. And the thing that I really appreciated and I'm excited to be involved with is looking at the community outreach and connection with our youth. So they also have a voice in, hey, this is, when I define culture, or I define what it is to be a Longmont resident, this is what I think of, and how being able to incorporate that into this work. But it seemed like, as I was listening to folks talk, that it's all very much like a design challenge type initiative, where we're just kind of putting all the ideas out on the table and kind of seeing what would be most desirable, and also what would be most sustainable and effective use of that space. So I'm really excited to see what comes down, and having the opportunity for our members of the community to be a part of this process. So I'm excited to see. But again, being able to have these conversations about this is not going to work in this space, but this will work in that. So just kind of keeping that open mind and being flexible. I'm kind of one that where let's throw ideas and let's come up with stuff, and other people really want to have that plan already laid out and that visualization. But I really see that folks are trying to we're creating the vision as we move along. So I'm excited to see what evolves.
Thank you. I agree with all of it. Great presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now we're the exciting part of our agenda, which is public invited to be heard. So we have on the screen, for those of you that are interested in calling in, please dial the toll-free number, which is 888-788-0099. Enter the meeting ID 863-3390-2947. And when you're asked for your participant ID, press your pound sign. And please mute your live stream when you call in. You will be put into a waiting room. And when it's time for you to speak, we will introduce you by the last 3 digits of your phone number. So thank you. We're going to take a 5-minute break while people call in.
All right, Mayor Peck, we are coming back at about the 5-minute mark. Perfect. I am going to drop the slide right now. I do see we have 3 callers in the chat waiting right now. And once we are back live on the live stream, I will let you know.
Okay.
Okay, I am seeing you live. Are you ready for me to call on the first caller?
Yes, please.
Dallas, give us just a minute. Let's wait for all of council to get on screen.
Perfect. I believe all council members are back. Mayor Peck,
Yes.
would you like?
Yes, the first caller, please.
Perfect. Will do. All right. To those calling in, just let you know that you will have, I will be calling you in with the last 3 digits of your number. You will hit, I believe it is star 6. Yes, star 6 to unmute yourselves. And you will have 3 minutes to speak. And during that time, you need to start by stating your name and your address. And with that, we are going to start with, give me just a moment.
And Dallas, you may want to remind them to mute their live stream and listen through their telephones.
Yes, absolutely. If you are listening through your live streams, please mute yourselves and listen through the phone. And we're going to start with the last 3 numbers of your phone number are 498. Caller 498, would you unmute yourself, please?
Good evening, Mayor Peck and members of the council. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can.
My name is Sam Saifi. I am representing Longmont Multicultural Committee tonight. You have seen me in other roles in the past. I'm here to introduce myself again as a member of the Multicultural Committee and basically thank you for your support of the Multicultural Committee and the activities that we have done and we are doing. You are probably aware that the last 20 years, we have been involved in many events around the city. I'm going to list a few of them just so you will be refreshed. In January, there is Martin Luther King's Day, the MLK Day. In February, there is Chinese New Year celebration. In May, we have Cinco de Mayo. In June, we have Juneteenth. In July, we used to support Rhythm on the River, but now that has become a mature event and they are on their own, so they don't need our support anymore, that's our goal with all the events. In September, you probably have participated in Inclusive Communities Celebration. By the way, that one, we started in the city civic center, then we moved it to senior center, and now we moved it to the museum, and now the museum is too small for us. So it has grown over the years. And the last but not least is Day of the Dead. So we celebrate, we help, we fund a little bit, not much, a few $100s here, a few $1,000s here and there. But in either case, we appreciate your support and your funding being as part of the budget of the city, small budget of the city. And know that we are here to help you, to support you, and to do whatever the city wants and be a voice for our multicultural community within Longmont, to you and others. Anyway, so thank you, folks, and appreciate what you do. I was listening for the last hour and got a taste of the things that you do, so thank you.
Okay, and Mayor Peck, are you okay moving on to the next caller?
Oh, yes, please.
Perfect. All right, caller.
Dallas, one
Yes.
moment. Mayor Peck, are you going to be timing them or shall we?
Oh, I suppose I could time them.
Okay, we didn't want to override your timing system if we started at a different time.
Okay, good. Now we're all on the same page.
Okay, we will let you do that. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, and with that, caller 949, would you unmute yourself, please? Caller with the last 3 digits of your number, 949. Please unmute yourself.
Hi.
I can see you there. Hi there.
Hi, this is Ruby Bowman, area 1512 Left Hand Drive. Following are my comments regarding the Rivertown annexation. 1, the concept plan is not in compliance with the proposed zoning of mixed-use employment. The intent of this zoning is to encourage and promote primary employment. However, 90% of the development will be residential housing, which is a secondary use. The developer should go back to the drawing board and revise its concept plan to show primary employment as a predominant and primary use on this property. 2, as a condition of annexation, require the installation of a multi-layered vegetative buffer between the development property and the creek corridor, as well as Fairground Lakes and Rogers Grove. The Land Development Code requires that man-made facilities shall be screened from off-site observers and blend with the natural visual character of the area. What I've seen of new development near my neighborhood along Left Hand Creek, it doesn't seem as if the city enforces this regulation. Number 3, the environmental planner must be actively and deeply involved in every phase of the development. Planner must conduct ground truthing surveys to ensure that the Rivertown habitat assessment reports are accurate. Several years ago, I read an update of a habitat assessment for a development along the St. Vrain near Martin Street. The update was short with few words. It was as if the environmental consultant took 5 minutes to look through his binoculars to come up with the conclusion there was no wildlife present. This report should not have been accepted by the city. 4, the combined impacts of Rivertown, Mountain Brook, and Riverset developments will generate enormous traffic congestion on Hover and nearby roads. Require a comprehensive traffic study of the area to assess the impacts. The number 1 complaint of residents is traffic congestion. I am a homeowner. I was a renter for many years of my life. Don't build equity when you rent an apartment. In fact, you lose money. The Rivertown development, with its 320 apartment dwellings, won't do much for employers who say they want their employees to invest in the community, build equity. Good paying primary jobs that pay a better wage and provide good benefits with a 401k or pension would do more to help the situation than building more apartment buildings with high rents. Thank you so much.
Perfect timing, Ruby. Thank you. The next caller, please.
Will do. All right, caller with the last three digits, 323. Would you unmute yourself, please? And we see you now.
Thank you. Jamie Semo, 1020 Venice Street. Thank you, Mayor and council members, for allowing me to speak tonight. Some of you have already heard my concerns regarding the Rivertown property. While I have no issues with bringing this property into Longmont proper, I am strongly of the opinion that there must be conditions to this annexation. As I've previously mentioned, the Resilient St. Vrain Flood Mitigation Project is most likely going to take the form of a split flow channel so that the bulk of the trees at Rogers Grove are preserved and surrounding properties aren't flooded. However, as currently envisioned, this split flow channel will go right through nesting bank swallow habitat at Rogers Grove. Bank swallows are a Boulder County species of special concern and nest in only a handful of known locations in Boulder County. As a condition of annexation, the Rivertown property owner must allow a conservation easement on their property so that the split flow channel does not impact this nesting habitat. My main concern regarding this annexation involves the concept plan for the development the property owner would like to build. I understand this is just a preliminary concept, but I'm concerned that 90% of the plan consists of residential uses. This area is zoned mixed-use employment. Longmont needs more good employers so that its residents don't have to commute to Boulder or Denver. Adding in mostly housing doesn't satisfy the primary use of the property being industrial/commercial zoning. I'd like to rebut the frequently stated but unsupported assertion that any development of this property would be better than what's there right now. Yes, with housing there, it won't be industrial runoff or heavy machinery, excluding the grading process, of course. But with housing and people comes increased traffic and human presence. That will certainly impact Rogers Grove and the river corridor. Currently, the land directly adjacent to Rogers Grove and the St. Vrain is undeveloped. With apartments and duplexes comes more stormwater runoff from more pavement, and especially more sound and light pollution, especially after work hours in the evening. Wildlife moves at night, and river corridors are wildlife movement corridors. How will the city keep residents from making social trails down to the river and accessing it there rather than from the intended access point on Dickens Farm? City Council communication mentioned several times how the residential portion of the development would be a compatible neighbor to the creek in Rogers Grove because these nature areas would provide a quiet and peaceful setting for the residential buildings. The municipal code asks that new building be compatible with the current surrounding area, not that the surrounding area be compatible with the new building. Another point raised has been a lack of affordable housing in Longmont, but this area is next to a highly desirable natural and public amenity. Can anyone seriously tell me that the developer is going to be putting in affordable units here? And these units will mostly be rentals. How will this help our workforce build equity in their own community? I ask that any development on this property be thoroughly vetted for its adherence to the municipal code, and that Longmont's new environmental planner be heavily involved in this and any other potential future development adjacent to our natural areas to ensure that they are truly compatible with the surrounding habitat. For example, multi-layered native vegetative buffers should be installed between the development and the natural area. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have any other callers?
And with that, we have no more callers.
Okay, so we will close the public invited to be heard and move on to what our readings on first ordinance. But before we read the ordinances, I assume because there are so many of them and a lot of them are debatable, that I would like to remind council that we can speak twice on each of these ordinances that you pull, 5 minutes for the first time and 3 minutes for the second time. So with that, Dawn, would you read the items on the consent agenda?
Absolutely, Mayor Peck. Item 9A is Ordinance 2021-78, a bill for an ordinance conditionally approving the Rivertown Annexation and Concept Plan, generally located north of Boston Avenue and west of Sunset Street at 21 South Sunset Street, and zoning the property MU-E mixed-use employment. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for January 11th, 2022. 9B is Resolution 2021-129, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the City of Longmont Services contract for public educational and governmental access television services. 9C is Resolution 2021-130, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the lease between the City and Longmont Public Media for the Carnegie Library Building, 457 4th Avenue. 9D is Resolution 2021-131, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the City and Regional Transportation District for the EcoPass program. 9E is Resolution 2021-132, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the City and Regional Transportation District for fare reimbursement on the Longmont local routes and accessoride services. 9F is Resolution 2021-133, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the 2022 intergovernmental agreement for bus service between the City of Fort Collins and the City of Longmont. 9G is Resolution 2021-134, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the City and Adams State University for a memorandum of affiliation permitting educational experiences and counseling. 9H is Resolution 2021-135, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the City and Colorado Department of Labor and Employment Division of Vocational Rehabilitation for paid work experience agreements from December 2021 through December 2022. 9I1 is Resolution 2021-136, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving an agreement for economic development services with the Colorado Enterprise Fund. 9I2 is Resolution 2021-137, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving an agreement for economic development services with Visit Longmont. 9I3 is Resolution 2021-138, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving an agreement for economic development services with the Longmont Economic Development Partnership. 9I4 is Resolution 2021-139, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving an agreement for economic development services with the Latino Chamber of Commerce of Boulder County. 9I5 is Resolution 2021-140, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving an agreement for economic development services with the Boulder Small Business Development Center. 9J is accept 4 capital improvement program amendments approved by the city manager. 9K is approved 2022 City of Longmont Water Principles, Colorado Municipal League Policy Statement, and National League of Cities Priorities in preparation for the 2022 state legislative session. And 9L is approved 1 capital improvement program amendment.
Would the councilors like, thank you, Don. Would the councilors like to pull any of these items? Anybody? Council, Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I'd like to pull 9A, please.
Okay. Any other councilors want to pull an item? Having seen that, can I have a motion to pass the consent agenda minus 9A?
I'll move the consent agenda minus 9A.
Thank you, Councilor Waters. Councilor Martin, do you want to second that? Okay.
Yes, second.
Thank you. It has been moved by Councilor Waters and seconded by Councilor Martin to move the consent agenda minus 9A. All those in favor? Raise your hand. Thank you. All those opposed? That carries unanimously. So we're going to read the ordinance on second reading and public hearings on any matter. The first one is A, Ordinance 2021-71A, a bill for an ordinance making additional appropriations for expenses and liabilities of the City of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2021. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for December 14th, 2021. Okay. Are there any questions is there a staff report on this?
Real quick.
No. Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Mayor Peck, since we have to do public comment on second readings, might I suggest, based on how we used to conduct the meeting the last time we were virtual, is that we open it up and let people call in for any of the items and then let them raise their hand if they want to comment on any specific one. Otherwise, we'll be, opening it up and closing it, opening and closing it virtually, which is kind of cumbersome. That's just a suggestion.
Thank you for reminding me. I had forgotten that it's been a while since we've done this virtually. So Dawn, can we have the public invited to be heard to comment on any of these ordinances if there's one specifically that they would like to comment on? So if you want to comment on any of the ordinances on second reading, please call in at 1-888-788-0099. Don't forget to enter the ID of 863-3390-2947 and press the pound key when you get your to get your participant ID. You'll have 3 minutes to comment on any of the ordinances. And with that, let's take a 3-minute break and wait for people to call in. I should probably read these ordinances. I'm wondering if that should be something, if we should read these ordinances. I'll go, you know, while they are calling in, I'll read the other 2 ordinances. The second one is 2021-72, an ordinance authorizing the refinancing of the lease purchase agreement dated August 1st, 2014, and the 2014 certificates of participation. Item C, 2021-73, a bill for an ordinance amending chapters 14.04, 14.12, 14.24, and 14.50 of the Longmont Municipal Code on fees and charges assessed in utility bills. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for December 14th, which is today.
Mayor, there are 3 more. Would you like me to read those for you? Was that a yes? Sorry, I was looking down.
No, I'll read them. Thank you.
Okay.
I forgot to turn the page. So item D is 2021-74, a bill for an ordinance amending section 4.08.040 of the Longmont Municipal Code on city rebate programs for income qualified residents and affordable housing operators. Item E is 2021-75, a bill for an ordinance conditionally approving the vacation of a portion of Emery Street right-of-way associated with the 210 Emery Street City Council regular session, December 14th, 2021. Page 4, minor subdivision plat and site plan generally located at the northeast corner of 2nd Avenue and Emery Street. Item F, 2021-76, a bill for an ordinance approving the concept plan amendment for the Daniels annexation located at the southeast corner of State Highway 66 and Alpine Street. I think that's it.
And Mayor, we are coming up about 20 seconds away from that 3-minute mark that you set. At the moment, I'm not seeing any callers.
Okay.
In that case, I am going to
Let's
bring
close the
down
public
the
invited to be
slide.
heard. Okay.
Yes.
Comments on the second reading. So let's start over for 2021-71. This was the bill for an ordinance making additional appropriations for expenses and liabilities of the city of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1st. Are there any questions from council on this ordinance? Does anybody else want to speak? Can we have a motion for a council member? Can somebody move this ordinance?
I move ordinance 2021-71.
I'll second that. All those in favor, raise your hand.
Mayor,
Yes.
how are you doing the public hearings on the ordinances? I'm a little unclear.
Well, what we did, Eugene, is read all the ordinance and then open up for public hearing on any of the ordinances. If anyone, is that okay to do that? I should have checked with you first.
That would be fine, just separate votes on the ordinances.
We thought that it was perhaps too cumbersome to read one, open up public hearing and then close it and then read another one, and to just do it all in one package deal.
Okay.
Thank you. So all those in favor of 2021-71, please raise your hand. All those opposed? Carries unanimously. B, an ordinance authorizing the refinancing of the lease purchase agreement dated as of August 1st, 2014, and the 2014 certificates of participation. Just as a clarifying statement, these are the COPs on Village at the Peaks.
Yes, they are. Mayor Peck, members of council, I'm Jim Goldner, Chief Financial Officer. So yes, these are the certificates of participation that were issued in 2014 to finance public improvements at the Village of the Peaks. We issued about almost $29.5 million of COPs then. They are outstanding through 2037. The current annual debt service ranges from $2.18 million a year to $2.29 million a year. We have currently $25.12 million left outstanding for those COPs. Again, they will be through 2037. So we're taking advantage of the current low interest rate situation to be able to refinance these COPs and hopefully be able to make some savings for the city and reduce this debt payment. We are projecting at this point that we should be able to generate a net present value savings estimated about 9.5%. The projected average annual savings should be about around $175,000 a year. Those are based on rates 3 weeks ago or so when we prepared this communication. So the market, of course, can change, and we will not be going to sale until January 12th. So it could go in either direction between now and then. It's actually a little bit more to our advantage currently, but again, things can change between now and then. It's another full month almost off. So that reduction in debt service on the COPs from this refunding will reduce the reliance on the sales tax from the Village at the Peaks to make future debt payments on the COPs. That's all I had. I can answer any questions. I also had the financial advisor and bond counsel available to answer questions.
So Jim, I do have a question before I turn it over to council members. Did I hear that perhaps with this debt reduction, we would be able to get at least one of our buildings off of this lien on the buildings?
Mayor Peck, you didn't hear that from me. So okay. What it's going to do, we are changing the sequence of when they can be released, but it's still going to be relying on, as we pay off the debt and reduce this amount of COPs outstanding, we'll be able to release some of those buildings one by one as that amount of value of the building is reduced from the amount outstanding. We haven't reached that yet for any one building. We are changing the sequence with this issuance so that we can release the library first and the civic center second, but it still will be a number of years before we reach that point.
Okay, great. Thank you and good work. Are there any other comments from the other councilors? Councilor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. Jim, let me go back to the implication of this refinancing of the COPs. In the report we got from you this week, right, in terms of overall revenue generation, that the comprehensive and very thorough report we get from you each month, you reported that currently 7.25% of sales tax is currently used for that debt service. Am I interpreting that correctly?
So yeah, what that was is that of the total debt service, sales tax is only used for 7.25% or so of the total debt service, I believe is what that was.
And this refinancing reduces that percentage?
Theoretically it does, as I've, some of you may be aware if you've read that email thoroughly, that we have had a reduction in the amount of the property tax TIF because of an abatement. And so that's actually going to probably offset somewhat how much less would have gone to this. So I think what's going to happen is we're not going to have to pay more in the long run. It really depends on how much savings we net out of the sale. We may get some sales tax savings and have less sales tax going to it than we do currently, but we will certainly have less sales tax going to it than we would otherwise without the refunding.
Yeah. And one of the question that the mayor asked about the implications for liens on buildings, that the specter of that, right, liens on buildings and what how the city collateralized that financing a number of years ago. I still think people walk around with concerns or questions about whether or not city buildings are at risk. And if anybody had a chance to read the monthly update we get from you on the overall financial performance of Village of the Peaks, it's pretty doggone impressive, at least from my perspective. I ran for this seat 4 years ago with a set of assumptions about the deal that was made on Village of the Peaks, and learned fairly quickly that the performance of Village of the Peaks is pretty impressive financially. People can like or not like, and the amount of asphalt, and that it's not mixed use the way some people hoped, and all those kinds of things. But bottom line financial performance, it's pretty impressive. Would you agree?
Yeah, I'm really pleased with how it's gone, Council Member Waters. In fact, we finished the URA tax year at the end of October, and there was $5.3 million of sales tax generated at the Village of the Peaks, which, if you compare to what was being generated before the URA was created. So when the Twin Peaks Mall was still open and operating, it was less than $800,000. So we've gained over $4.5 million of annual sales tax to this point. So yeah, I think it's done very well, and most of that sales tax is going into the general fund, the public improvement fund, and very little of it is needed to pay this debt service. Property tax from the property owners is what really pays 85% or more of this debt service.
Yeah, I just want to say I was one who was a critic of that deal when it was made, and I'm now a believer that that council and the staff and the folks, the business side of this involved in the financing plan and the overall performance have done a remarkable job. And to be able to take advantage of a beneficial interest rate, right, to potentially reduce the percentage of sales tax, or not growing the percentage of sales tax required to service that debt, I think is a really profound statement in the right direction. So good on you, and good on the merchants, and the overall management of the project. Thanks.
Thank you.
Do you have any other comments for Jim Golden? With that, can I have a motion to pass 2021-72?
I'll move. I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Waters. Let's vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? That passes unanimously. Ordinance C on second reading, 2021-73, a bill for an ordinance amending chapters 14.04, 14.12, 14.24, and 14.50 of the Longmont Municipal Code on fees and charges assessed in utility bills. Are there any questions from council on this? Okay, seeing none, I will move to pass ordinance 2021-73.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? All those opposed? Thank you. That passes unanimously. Ordinance 2021-74, a bill for an ordinance amending section 4.08.040 of the Longmont Municipal Code on city rebate programs for income qualified residents and affordable housing operators. Are there any questions or comments from council? Seeing none, can I have a motion to move 2021-74?
So moved.
Thank you. Second. Thank you. Councilwoman Hidalgo-Fahring seconded. I saw her hand first. And that was moved by Councillor Waters. All those in favor? All those opposed? That passes unanimously. E 2021-75. This is a bill for an ordinance conditionally approving the vacation of a portion of Emery Street right-of-way associated with the 210 Emery Street City Council regular session, December 14th, 2021, page 4, minor subdivision plat and site plan generally located at the northeast corner of 2nd Avenue and Emery Street. Do I have any questions or comments from council? I would just like for anybody in the public that's listening, I do believe that this is the right-of-way, the vacation and the portion of right-of-way that is connected to or in line with the transit station development. Am I correct on that? The Brian Bear development?
Yeah, this is the area that's related to the 150 Main development, correct, Brian?
Yeah, that's correct, Mayor and Council. It's part of the South Main Station redevelopment.
Okay, great, thanks. Do we have any comments? Oh, I already asked that. All those in favor of, can I have a motion? For 2021-75.
So moved.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Second. Oh, sorry.
Councilor Yarbrough, thank you very much. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, thank you. That passes unanimously. We have one last one, 2021-76, which is a bill for an ordinance approving the concept plan amendment for the Daniels annexation located at the southeast corner of State Highway 66 and Alpine Street. Do we have any comments or staff comments?
Mayor, we do have a brief staff presentation on this one.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Peck, council members, Ava Pehajewski, principal planner. I do have a brief PowerPoint if you'd like to see it. Dallas, could you cue that up for us? Thank you so much. Next slide, please. Just to give you some background on the location of this property, this is at the southeast corner of Highway 66 and Alpine Street. We have the Prairie Village neighborhood just to the west of it there, where KB Homes is currently building some homes there. There's the Village Co-op you may be familiar with. It's a 3-story co-op building, multifamily building. You can see it off Highway 66 as well as Alpine Street. And the land area of this parcel when it was annexed was 8 acres. However, the land area of this amendment that we're talking about today is little less than 2 acres. If you look there in the red box, this is the area that was annexed that we're talking about, the Daniels annexation. And it's this area on the outside, on the east or on the right and on the bottom, if you will, going around the new street there called Lily Court. And it was annexed in 2006 as a PUD residential zone. And then it was rezoned again to residential mixed neighborhood in 2018 as part of the city's overall rezoning. And the new zoning allows multifamily homes as well as paired homes. As you can see here, the Village Co-op is a multifamily home. The Envision Longmont comprehensive plan designates this as mixed neighborhood. And the allowable density for this property goes between a minimum of 6 dwelling units per acre to a maximum of 8 dwelling units per acre. This is a range of 48 to 144 dwelling units based on the size of it. And so they're proposing 16 units. There's 52 units in Village Co-op. So there'll be a total of 68 dwelling units. Again, really on the lower end of the allowable density in this area. Next slide, please. And so this is the original concept plan from 2006 that City Council approved. And the hatched line that you see there at the corner of Highway 66 and Alpine, that's the Village Co-op apartments that's sitting there now. And then as you can see on the right and on the bottom side, which would be the east and the south side, they envisioned 8 single family lots, separate lots, as you can see there. And they all sort of abut the Pleasant Valley single family residential neighborhood. And so that was the plan, the concept plan. There was a local street planned to be accessed from Alpine Street. That's Lily Court, that cul-de-sac, and that's currently built out. Next slide, please. And so this amendment, so what happened was this property was annexed, the Village Co-op apartments were built, and the 8 single family lots were platted. So those are platted lots. What they're asking to do is replat this from 8 to 16 lots so that they can have paired homes. And that's consistent with the KB homes that's over west of this property that's going on. It's essentially, instead of having one house on one lot, you've got one building that has two homes and each home is on its own lot. Again, the total density would bring it to 68 dwelling units, and the zoning allows up to 144. So this is on lower end. Next slide. And so we had some public input, obviously. We had a neighborhood meeting in January of this year. This was virtual because of the pandemic. So we had 22 attendees, and the general concerns raised were regarding the additional 8 homes that would be there and the traffic impacts that would result from the 8 houses there, the 8 additional houses, sorry. They then filed an application, and we sent out notices to the neighborhood to 1,000-foot radius in March. We got 2 written objections, again, about the increased density of 8 more houses and the traffic impacts that would ensue. And those written objections were in your packet as well. Well, it was in the Planning Commission packet. And then we sent out a notice of public hearing in October of this year. Again, we got 1 objection prior to the packet being sent out, similar concerns. And again, that's in your packets. And then this ultimately went to Planning and Zoning Commission in October 27th. And they recommended approval on a 7-0 vote after a lengthy discussion with the traffic consultant. Next slide. And so the applicant is here to do a presentation if council desires, or if you just want to ask questions, let us know how you'd like us to proceed.
Councilors, do you have any concerns or questions? Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I probably have a somewhat unique perspective on this, as it was still going through planning and zoning while I was a commissioner before my election in 2017, and has been, in the works for quite a few years, as was demonstrated there. And I don't necessarily need a presentation from the applicant, in the sense that I think if we look at it from a couple perspectives, one that we've already kind of talked about in the STEAM sugar mill talk was the missing middle, and that tends to deal more with attached housing and a little higher density housing. One that we did talk about a good number of years ago is transitions from higher density to lower density uses. And so to me, it seems that these paired homes actually provide a better transition to the single family homes that are adjacent to the neighborhood. The village co-op is obviously a very high density comparison to paired homes, and then to single family homes that are on the south and east sides. So I don't feel that it's a big stretch. I think that it's, something obviously that we've talked about before as a council that the city very much needs, as well as providing us, that kind of transitionary buffer that we haven't talked about a lot since we installed that in, specifically more downtown. But I think that's a very important thing going forward as we continue to talk about increasing densities and how we buffer that with other residential uses. And so I don't, like I said, need a presentation by the applicant, but I think that this is probably not as deleterious of an effect, instead of saying that, heck, based on the mixed neighborhood zoning, the residential mixed neighborhood zoning, that you could go even a more denser quality or a more denser product, such as straight row homes, not just paired homes. So, I think to me, it sounds almost more like a very good compromise that I think will benefit the city overall.
Thank you. I do have a question. Why, since it's zoned to hold 144 units, is the developer only putting in 68? That may have been explained, but I don't understand it. Is there?
Well, we do have the applicant here.
Okay.
But what I could say is that when the city built the village co-op building and they platted the 8 residential lots, they put in all of the utilities and all of the infrastructure for that level of density. So I think that doing, well, a couple things, but one is transitionally, I think duplex or paired homes make a much better transition from the single family homes next door than to, you know, really large high density development. But secondly, the infrastructure is already built on that whole street.
Oh, okay.
And so I think really, and I'll let the applicant speak, but I think, you know, that would be very difficult to have to rip up all the streets to add more water and sewer. But the applicant is here. I think we have Joel Siemens and Ken Voss here. I don't know if either of you want, there we are.
There they are.
Hello.
Hello. So Ava's that made sense. Her explanation made sense to me. I was just kind of curious about it. But one other question, are these going to be market value for sale or rental? Or do you know that yet?
As they're currently entitled with a single family detached 8 lots, it would be market value and they would be for sale probably. That's the best guess. The developer's current intention is to continue to there in the background, there's a discussion about whether or not there would be for sale or only for rent or whatever, and that is really going to be determined by market conditions at the time of delivery. However, this also does kick in the city requirement for affordable housing, which does not previously exist on the 8 lots. So of these 16 lots, then there will be the affordable housing requirement that will impact the required ratio on those lots. So that will have an impact as well on the financial pro forma, if you will, of the project as it moves forward.
Okay, thank you. It looks like Councillor Martin also has a question.
Yes, a comment first to the developers, which is it's relatively easy to make duplexes attainable, which would mitigate an unexpected need to pay fees in lieu, you know, because these are not necessarily going to be affordable properties. So, you know, consider that. Consider attainable for sale, because that's what we think we need as a council. But the question that I wanted to ask you was about the traffic. You know, I didn't go and read the whole planning and zoning report on this. There are always neighborhood objections about traffic. Can you just summarize quickly for us what the traffic study said and why you are confident that this is not going to be a problem?
I believe the applicant's traffic engineer is here as well, right? Is Matt here?
I saw him on earlier, so.
Matt, would you like to jump on and there we go.
I'm here, Matt Ellis. We did the traffic study for the original lesser number of units, and the extra units are going to have a very small impact on the traffic as was reported when it was half the number, shall we say. And we're talking about single digit increases in traffic. So it's going to be small. Will people notice it? Certainly, you know, that's a given, but it's, you know, the street system is there, it's adequate, and it can certainly handle the additional traffic.
Thank you. Thank you. Seeing no other questions. Oh, there it is. Councillor Waters.
Just building on the comment about minimum amount of traffic, just talk a bit about parking and whether it's 8 or 16. What are the parking options or plans for that development?
So I'll jump in before Matt, but Lily Court has parking availability on both sides of the street. There are no restrictions. It's cul-de-sac, but there is parking availability. For the residential homes, it's my understanding, and it was a requirement that they have at a minimum of 2 cars parking garage for each unit. And I believe in their concept plan, that's what they showed. I can punt it back to Ken and Joe and Matt, but I believe that's the plan is to put 2-car garages, plus they'll have 2 cars that can park in the driveway behind the 2-car garages. And then there's also parking, a significant amount of parking on Lily Court on both sides. And I don't know.
Just to clarify on the parking. So we're talking each duplex has a 2-car garage and a 2-car driveway. So each duplex would park 4 cars.
Thank you.
Hypothetically. Each individual unit of the duplex would park 4 cars.
Okay, look, it seems like there's no other comments. So thank you very much for the presentation. It explained a lot and allowed us to ask some questions. Can I have a motion to move 2021-76?
So moved.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, seconded by Susie Hidalgo-Fahring. All those in favor? All those opposed? That carried unanimously. So that is it for the ordinances on second reading. Councilwoman Yarbrough, you just said that you might have to leave early. I'm wondering how early is that? Because I would like you to be here for the compensation review for a municipal judge. And can you wait that long as we go through the agenda, or?
Mayor, it would be beneficial for me to leave by 9:30. My flight leaves at midnight tonight, 12:30. Okay. So I need to get to the airport. Okay. So yeah, so I don't want to be late, and then I'll be staying at your place for the holidays. So
okay. So I would like a motion to revise the agenda in order for us to be able to vote on the compensation review for municipal judge, so that Councilor Yarbrough has a chance to weigh in on that. Can I have a motion to do that, to move?
I'll move that we change the order of business.
Thank
And I'll
you.
second it.
Thank you. That was moved by Councilor Waters, seconded by Councilor Hidalgo-Fahring. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. So the compensation review for the municipal judge, are we going to have any kind of a presentation on that, or just a vote? Do we have?
I believe there will just be a motion.
Okay, Councilor Waters.
Yeah, thanks. I'll offer the motion.
Okay.
The city of Longmont, the one city of Longmont employee whose 2022 compensation's not yet been adjusted to reflect the city's philosophy and approach to salary being at market plus 1% is Judge Robert Frick. To bring Judge Frick's salary in line with the city's philosophy and approach, commensurate with other city of Longmont employees, it needs to be set at $175,431. I therefore move adjustment of Chief Municipal Judge Robert Frick's salary to 2022 salary to $175,431.
I'll second that. Is there any discussion from councilors? Seeing none, let's vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? That carries unanimously.
Can I say thank you, Judge? Thank you to Judge Frick.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Councilor Yarbrough, for hanging out with us to get that vote in. Now we will revert back to the original agenda and do the items removed from the consent agenda. That was by Mayor Pro Tem Aren Rodriguez. You moved 9A. You pulled 9A.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Peck. It's well known amongst my colleagues here on council, as well as I think in much of the public, how I stand on annexations, which is that I'm pro-annexation to pull in these pieces of property for jurisdiction within city development and review. We've heard a couple calls. I know that we've received emails on this one. So there's definitely questions. My question is not necessarily with the annexation. I will be voting for annexation, but I will state, and I want to state it fairly strongly, similarly to an annexation that happened north of Highway 66 across from the Walmart, that the concept plan holds some concern. First of all, I'd like to say that I am pro high density residential. I think it's much more sustainable environmentally. I do think that we need to, though, as we've spoken multiple times about tonight, get a lot of for sale product in this market that we don't already have. So that's one concern I have, is that, at least reading the communication, this company tends to hold these things as rental properties. That's a concern with the concept plan. As you can imagine, another concern is that this is an area of very large environmental sensitivity. So I would urge that any wildlife studies and similar environmental impact studies be undertaken with the impeccability that there will not be much scrutiny that could be placed on the studies. I'd be very careful about that as an applicant, because we've made it clear that we have the 150-foot setback. It will go through the SES most likely that we've put into place. And of course, unlike in some past years, this will come back before the city council versus just through the Planning and Zoning Commission. So I just like to maintain a couple of those aspects. And it is also concerning to me that mixed use employment states that high density multifamily residential is specifically a secondary use. So those are just some concerns I have with the compatibility, or the concept plan. Also understanding exactly that it's just a concept plan. So it's one of those things where, yes, I'm going to vote for the annexation, but I have a lot of concerns. I probably would be surprised if I was the only council member with a number of concerns. I do agree with the statement that was made earlier, that just because it's quiet and surrounded by nice open space kind of amenities and parks type amenities doesn't necessarily make it the best place for residential. So doesn't say that there shouldn't be residential, because mixed use employment does specifically talk about certain kinds of residential, high density being secondary use, but live work being much more appropriate, for instance. And again, I'm still more concerned, I think, with also the concept that these will just be another large kind of multifamily rental development, where I don't think that we necessarily have the best public transit available, and that it's not close enough to amenities like grocery shopping. And even because it's stated that in the planning and zoning minutes, that some said it was close. I've done that walk in that stretch before, and there's no way I would walk and buy groceries and walk back. That's a very considerable walk or bicycle ride, if you will. So those are just a bunch of concerns I have for the applicant as they move forward with an actual development plan, not just a concept plan. With that said, I will move Ordinance 2021-78.
Second, and I have a comment.
Okay, Councillor Martin.
My comment is that while I agree with the Mayor Pro Tem that rental is probably not the best use of the housing space available, I read over all of the code and land use definitions this weekend, not necessarily with the same expertise that the Mayor Pro Tem brings to the problem, but I didn't see anything that talked about what the proportions of primary and secondary use ought to be. Live work was mentioned, and I think it's an obvious application, at least for the east end of the residential development, because there is an industrial section there. And I also don't see much of a problem with the environmental concerns, because in 2018, we did a lot of work to make sure that areas like this would be handled properly by environmental concerns. I got some letters, and those letters really talked about doing good supervision while the land was being disturbed for the construction. And yeah, we definitely need to, as a city, make sure that the contractors are not careless with the runoff that happens into the riparian area while the soil is being disturbed and all of that. But I think that as long as the setbacks and the surface restriction requirements and stuff are observed, that we need this housing and we should go forward. So I will also be voting in favor.
Are there any other comments from councilors? I'll weigh in on this then. As I was reading through all of the materials presented on this ordinance, I could not, other than looking at the concept plan, decide what the primary use was going to be, as stated, because the codes, everything within the materials stated that housing and the economic part of it, commercial part, were both secondary uses. So if those are going to be stated as secondary uses, what is the primary use? Is there anybody available to answer that?
Yes, Mayor Peck, council members, Ava Pehejevsky with Planning Department. Yes, we had a lengthy discussion about this, the Planning and Zoning Commission. When we talk about primary uses and secondary uses, we don't really take it on a parcel by parcel basis. We take it on a zoning district, because that's how the land development code is written when we talk about, for example, secondary uses. So if you were to look at a zoning map, and I'll bring this in the presentation when we have our public hearing, but this whole area on Boston Avenue is designated as mixed use employment. And so if we take the total acreage of all this land that is zoned mixed use employment from end to end, as we call the district, and then we say, okay, we add up the aggregate of that acreage. The primary uses in that zoning district are typically the industrial users. We have, the biggest one there is the Left Hand Brewery, but we have several other different companies there that are primary employment type of businesses. And then the code does allow residential, high density residential as a secondary use. So if we take the total acreage from this annexation that's proposed to have the high density residential, it's less than half of the total aggregate acreage of the mixed use employment zone. And so from city planning's perspective, that is a secondary use in that mixed use employment district in that neighborhood.
It does not look like that from the concept plan that was in the packet. And going south from the railroad on Sunset, it is all commercial, except for the school that is there. So I have concerns about putting residential in a place that does not have what residential rentals or even for sale houses have. They, in their concept plan or in their write-up, they said that there was going to be proposed transit from Boston Avenue, but there isn't going to be any stops at all. So that multimodal aspect is not right. That bus is only coming from 119 and going up Boston, but there are no stops. So people will not be able to board or off board from that. And has this area all been designated blighted? And if so, who did that study and when was that designated? And is it in an enterprise zone?
So I know Tony Chacon is on the meeting here, and I'll defer to him. But to my understanding, this is not designated yet by the city council as blighted. I believe the applicant is doing a study and David Starnes is representing the property owner. He is also on the meeting. So with that, I don't know if, oh, I'm sorry, Tony has left the meeting. I'm sorry, after the STEAM presentation, he left. David Starnes is here. David, do you want to provide information about the blight study?
Sure. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Good evening, Mayor Peck, council member. I'm here representing the applicant, and we did initiate a blight study for what we call the River District. We actually just got a draft report from our consultant, and our next step is to plan to share that with Tony Chacon, the staff redevelopment urban renewal, to discuss next steps and how he would like to proceed in terms of working through this process. So yes, we just did a blight study. We actually just finished up last week and we just got the report. So we are reviewing it, but our plan is to meet with Tony to see what he would like to do.
Okay. I guess I'm really concerned, and because I haven't got it in my mind what the primary use of this land is going to be. And I understand, Ava, that you said on Boston Avenue, but this isn't on Boston Avenue. This is on Sunset. So it's a different, that on Boston Avenue, the primary uses and secondary uses were, that it could basically be a primary use for residents, that it was all mixed use zoning. But this is on Sunset, which is a very different traffic pattern. And since it is probably our biggest development to date next to the river corridor, I'm very concerned about basically what Ruby said really struck me as having an environmental planner, making sure that all of the codes and things were kept up per the city codes and zoning. So I wish we had a better concept plan for this annexation at this moment. So I'm not going to vote for this unless there's a caveat that the secondary use of the residential is really outlined in a good concept plan, because I don't know what we are annexing and what they're going to do with it. So I won't vote for it unless there's that caveat that the primary use is mostly commercial. Councillor Martin.
Yeah, I just want to say, to clarify what Ava said, which is that the proportion that you're talking about is not based on the parcel, but the entire zoning area. And that's what the proportions that she talked about will. So this is still an employment zone with residential in it. And I mean, I think, just for the social equity concerns, honestly, that we have a housing shortage, the time to apply pressure on the developers is when we want to incentivize them to build the right kind of housing. But getting the opportunity to build is really important to us now. So that's why I support the annexation.
I agree with what you're saying. I just do not believe that this commercial area is a place to put high density residential. It doesn't have the walkable amenities that we're talking about we want in our urban areas. It's like a little island of homes in a huge commercial area. So I'd rather see the concept plan. Councilwoman Hidalgo-Fahring.
So I do have a question for Ava, and maybe for the developer or somebody to represent. So in looking at this concept plan, is he tied to this particular idea of the residential duplex development taking up that much space, residential apartment taking up that much space, or is there still room for flexibility as far as reducing the number in the apartments? My concern with that we're just putting more rentals, and I would really like to see more opportunity for purchased properties. And So go, if you can answer that question first, and then I have something else.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Peck, Councilmember Hidalgo. So the question is, are they tied in? You know, again, just to reiterate, this isn't a construction application, a development project. It's a high-level concept plan. This is the only question that is being asked of you for this application is, can this property be in City of Longmont and not in Boulder County? Okay. If it were annexed, then they would have to come in with a development application. And then that's where we start getting into the details about environmental planning and so forth. Yes, absolutely, we would do that. But to answer your question, Councilmember Hidalgo-Fahring, yes, this is the concept plan, and what it's saying, generally speaking, we want to have 20,000 square feet of commercial facing Sunset Street. And then we're going to have these apartments over on the, you know, kind of on the center, the north and the west side. We'll have these townhome units. I would presume for sale, but again, David is on the meeting, and you know the applicant can speak to whether they're for sale or for rent. But generally speaking, yes. So our development code says if you're annexed and you want to come in with a development application, one of the criteria is your development should be generally consistent with a concept plan that was approved by City Council. That's often why you see me here bringing amendments to you. Generally speaking, we can tweak things if they want to have a few units less because it won't work for, say, an infrastructure or the engineering design. We can tweak things mildly, but generally speaking, yes.
So, and you know, primarily my question comes from, and seeking clarification comes from people's calls, emails, just things, concerns that I've heard from the public. So just wanting to kind of clarify that issue. And this discussion around the 90% housing, but being deemed as a secondary use. I heard that when I was watching the planning and zoning meeting, that discussion happened, and there seemed to be two different philosophies or interpretations of that code, where one is looking parcel by parcel, having it be primary, and another viewpoint was looking at the whole district and having that district. So, you know, I can understand, you know, the argument on both sides. But I would, you know, I guess my recommendation would be for, you know, I approve of the annexation, but I'm not that thrilled with the concept plan. And I really hope that he's flexible, or the developer or is really, you know, taking into account concerns, how to rectify some of these situations, and really kind of address more of our priorities as a council and a community. So that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Councilor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. As I'm listening to the conversation, both as a council member and if I were just listening, after all the words about housing, both in council meetings and outside council chambers or outside council meetings, all the words about the kinds of the housing inventory we need, the variety and the numbers, and we have said, please bring us proposals for housing of various types. Now, we can argue about how many of these should be rentals and the preference for mid-tier, missing middle, for purchase homes. I agree with that. But I also have been in these conversations when we've talked about the two areas where we could help as a city, reduce the cost of construction that might result in more proposals for mid-tier, for purchase housing, that missing middle type of housing, as opposed to the number of apartments we get. The two areas we could help, one is in the reduction of the time associated with permitting, which adds every day unnecessarily in that process, adds cost. And the second is to do everything we can to bring tools into the toolbox that allow developers to figure out how to finance the cost of infrastructure. And we've said, you can't use those tools. Right? We've said to the developers, you got to play by a set of rules that make it more and more difficult to give us a yes to the question we ask Can you build us what we need? Yes, but help us in these ways. And we say, not so quick. We don't want it there. We don't want to see secondary use. That it's a permitted, the secondary use is a permitted use in this district. What's been proposed is a permitted secondary use in this district, and it's a permitted secondary use that's responsive to what we've said we need.
Councillor Waters.
Yes.
Thank you. I think that.
Am I the only one on the clock?
No, you are not the only one.
So if I'm not finished, I don't get to finish?
Finish your sentence, please.
Well, maybe I have more than one sentence to say.
I know, but we have a time limit. Thank you.
Yeah, well, let's be consistent. If we're gonna apply the time limit, let's be consistent in how we apply the time limit and apply it every time. I'm going to vote for this, and I think we have an obligation to be clear on what we're expecting. And if you read the planning and zoning minutes, the discussion of secondary use, it wasn't a variety of views. There was a single a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission who voted against this and expressed a minority view that was not consistent with either the staff or the planning director on the definition of secondary use and how it's applied to a district.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? So Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, would you like to move this ordinance since you pulled it?
I technically already did move the ordinance.
Okay. And we did have second. I'm sorry, Councillor Martin seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed. So it passed with the mayor in opposition. So that brings us to the last part of our meeting, which is going to be general business. We already did the judge's compensation. So now we were looking at the Longmont Climbing Collective Conditional Use Site Plan. Is there going to be a presentation on this? And who is going to present?
Zach's going to present this.
And Dallas has the staff presentation first. We can pull that up.
Okay, thank you.
All right, good evening, members of council, Mayor Peck. Zach Blazek, Associate Planner, Planning and Development Services here to present the Longmont Climbing Collective Conditional Use Site Plan Development Review Application. Dallas, you can go to the next slide. So we have a development proposal. It's here at the northwest corner of Peak Ave and State Highway 119, so just north of Sandstone Ranch Park and south of Burrito Kitchens and Smuckers. It's a roughly 12-acre parcel zoned non-residential primary employment, and it's currently vacant. The other thing that I want to point out is just to the west of the parcel is the Spring Gulch number 2, which is a city-owned property. Dallas, you can go to the next slide. So here we have kind of a zoomed out view of the entire proposed development. You can see that we have proposed construction in the northeast corner of the site. The proposed construction is a commercial recreation facility, which is a private use or development providing amusement or sport. Specifically, what we have here is a rock climbing facility. The other thing that I want to point out just in the zoomed out perspective here is there's a line towards the western property line that marks the 150-foot riparian setback. We can see here in this view that all of the proposed construction is outside of that setback area. Dallas, you can go to the next slide. Here we have just more of a zoomed in look at the proposed construction in the northeast corner of the site. Next slide, please. So the next couple of slides, including this one, are just some looks at the proposed elevations and just the proposed building on the site. Next slide. This is the southern portion of the site. Next slide. And then here on the west, southwest facing edge, we have a small outdoor portion that is an outdoor rock climbing facility specifically. Next slide. So the proposed use again is a commercial recreation facility, which is permitted as a conditional and secondary use in the NPE zone district. with the use-specific standard that it shall not exceed 25,000 square feet. For the staff review portion and for your final decision-making, it's subject to the review criteria for all applications in section 12 or 1502.055, as well as for secondary uses in 1504.030. Next slide, please. For the staff review portion, the project we found met the land development code requirements for a conditional use site plan in the zone district. So I reviewed items like the maximum height, setbacks, building design standards, exterior lighting, circulation, and pedestrian linkage. And at the conclusion of our most recent review, we did have some minor remaining comments, but nothing that wasn't, completable for this step of the review. Next slide. So as far as community input on this application, we had a neighborhood meeting in February of this year that did not have any attendees from the public. We notified the whole usual list of referral agencies, and XL was the only one to respond with general comments. We sent the notice of application for the first review of development in June when we accepted the application for review. And we sent out notices for the public hearings on November 1st, Planning and Zoning Commission, and December 1st for this meeting. For all of those notices, we received no comments from members of the public. Next slide. So the reason why we're here this evening is the project site is located adjacent to a city-owned park, greenway, or open space. Again, that's Spring Gulch number 2. So based on a new ordinance that we passed in March, the Planning and Zoning Commission serves as the recommending body, where typically they're the decision-making body for a conditional use site plan. This time, council is the deciding body going off of that PZ recommendation. So this is the first time we've seen an application for a CUSP adjacent to a city-owned property being taken to you for consideration following the implementation of that ordinance. Next slide. So council can consider the following options when reviewing the CUSP application. You can approve, finding the review criteria have been met. You can approve with conditions, or you can deny, finding that review criteria have not been met. Next slide. So Planning and Zoning Commission last month voted unanimously to bring forward the recommendation to conditionally approve the conditional use site plan with the condition that the applicant shall complete all the outstanding remaining red lines in the site plan and obtain approval from the Development Review Committee. Next slide. So we do have an applicant presentation. Again, that's at the discretion of council if you'd prefer to see that.
Excuse me, I couldn't get my speaker on. Does anyone on council want to see the site plan? It was in our packet, but if you would like to see it here. It doesn't look like it, Zach. So once again, what were our council options that you need tonight?
So you can vote to approve this evening. You can vote to approve with conditions, or you can vote to deny the application for construction.
Okay, I am going to move that we approve the site plan.
Second.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Just a clarification on that. Does that mean that there's no longer the conditions that were recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission?
Zach, do they need to make the motion to include the conditions from planning and zoning?
That's actually up to them. They're the decision-making body. Council is the decision-making body. So you can approve with those conditions, or you can approve without them.
So I would suggest that we approve with the recommended conditions.
Okay, so Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez amended the motion that we approve with the recommended conditions.
I'll accept the second.
Thank you. So we need to vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Zach. The next thing on our agenda then is the presentation and approval of the 2022 Human Services Funding Allocation. And I see Karen Roney is here.
So yes, so Mayor Peck and members of City Council, Karen Roney with Community Services. And actually, Eliberto Mendoza with Community Services is going to be making the brief presentation to council. And I believe our Housing and Human Services Advisory Board Chair, Caitlin Abbott, I think she's still in the house, but she will be available if there are questions that council members might have. So this is our annual set of recommendations that we bring to City Council, the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board. Basically process the application, make the recommendations to council, and council is the deciding making body on to accept or to modify any of the recommendations for Human Service Agency funding for 2022. So I would invite Eliberto Mendoza to turn on his camera, his mic, and Dallas, we're ready to queue up the PowerPoint, if you will, please.
Good evening, Mayor Peck and council members. My camera is on. I'm not sure if you can see me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So good evening and thank you for listening to the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board's recommendations for the 2022 Human Agent Service funding. So as Karen, can you go to the next slide, Dallas? Next slide. So as Karen mentioned, this funding is set aside from the general fund, and we have been, the City Council has slowly increased it and have reached the goal that the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board had requested of 3%. This allowed us to increase our funding for human services agencies to a total of this year. We are allocating 56% of this funding to safety net services through our online application process for a total of 1.2 million. And we're dedicating 44% to our continuing support of housing insecurity and adult homelessness services. Could you pass the next slide, please? So how the human services funding works is we contract with agencies that are providing safety net services to low and moderate income residents of Longmont. All of our funding is connected to our 2020 Human Services Needs Assessment. As a reminder, the Human Services Needs Assessment has become in alignment with our HUD mandated 5-year consolidated plan. Even though we do have the option and we'll take the opportunity to update in between those 5 years. What the 2020 Human Services Needs Assessment demonstrated was that the priorities that were identified during the 2017 Human Services Needs Assessment remain the most important priorities to have, and so we've continued them. And these are the areas of housing stability, food and nutrition, health and well-being, self-sufficiency and resilience, education and skill building, and safety and justice. And so the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board works with staff and our partners, Boulder County and the City of Boulder, to do a joint application and make recommendations to City Council for approval. Next slide, please. And so how the allocation process works is we receive the applications. We ensure that the programs that are being proposed address the priority areas and addressing the community needs demonstrated, and that they're demonstrating some sort of community impact, and also ensuring that the agencies applying have sound financial management and operational practices. And we've implemented a formulaic process based on average scores of both staff and board. And the final score, the total score, when you add those two, determine what percentage of the request to be funded. In 2022, it has changed between the year between two. It was the lowest score an agency could receive was 74. If you received before that, you would not be recommended for funding. Next slide. So we have reset base funding to 0. In other words, we wouldn't be considering historical funding. We set priority ceilings for each of the priorities that we would. These are kind of our guidelines, are where we'd like to be. Not necessarily they have to be that way, but that's where we'd like to spend and invest this funding. And we also created a individual agency ceiling. In other words, no agency can receive more than 50% of the total priority ceiling, depending on what they ask and how they scored. Next slide. So this year, for 2022, we received 30 applications from 39 agencies to fund 45 programs, which requested a total of 1.45 million. As we usually do every year, we conducted public agency hearings. Board and staff reviewed and scored each application, and we did our allocation based on a formulaic approach. And this year, we're recommending to fund 36 agencies and 43 programs at $1.84 million. Next slide. So as you can see, we are not exactly completely aligned with all, but that's a lot of it has to do with who applies and how much they apply for and how many services are out there. So typically education and skill building, there's a lot of those services in Longmont, and they receive this year a larger portion of the funding. Next slide. So this year, it doesn't usually happen, but it did. Between the scoring and how much was requested, we still have 100,575 to be allocated. And so the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board has met and has these recommendations that we are working through, trying to decide which is the best way to move forward. These are some of the options. We could allocate funding to our homeless outreach team, Elder. Elder is applying for, the county is applying for a grant from the state. And if we don't receive that grant, then we would like to support it. That's one potential thing, right? Because we feel that the outreach is an important part of our strategies to address homelessness in Longmont. Or we could leverage this funding to address pandemic-related services like utility or rental assistance, childcare, mental health. These are all important issues. Another very important issue to the board is the continued emphasis on equity. And so we could use some of this funding to provide training or consultation to agencies to help improve how they're working on equity. Or we could take some of this money and see what unanticipated or emergent needs appear in Longmont, because those do come along. And I think the goal of the board is to determine the approach by the end of Q1 of 2022. Or we could make a combination of these two. The board is looking at what is the best way to move forward with this unallocated funding. So I think that next slide, I think that is the end of the presentation, and would love to have either questions about recommendations or the city council to adopt the recommendations for 22 funding.
Do you have any questions or comments from councilors on this presentation? Councilor Waters.
Thank you for the presentation. More importantly, thanks for the great work that you two and the board, the advisory board's done on this. I just want to make an observation. I continue to appreciate the work that gets done. And I know Karen and Alberto, it's the work you do with those who submit applications when we see what people are doing with objectives and measures. And I appreciate that. And it's not perfect still. There's still work to do. But I do want to, I think this is the first year we've seen the output and outcomes summary, isn't it?
I think that's a great question. I don't remember.
I actually went back last year. I thought I appreciate, first of all, I like it. I like that you did it. It is the follow on to the goals and objectives that people actually do collect data,
right,
and have submitted it, and you've had a chance to see the effects, whether it's an outcome or an output. Right. I think that's a big step in the right direction. And I did go back to last year's agenda in the attachments. I didn't see it. And I'm pretty certain it wasn't there before that, because we just weren't far enough along with, actually setting objectives. So I think that's a huge addition to what you provided, in addition to the applications and the recommendations, to see even a kind of a big picture, even if it's a fuzzy picture on the outputs, if not outcomes, of the work we funded in the past. So thanks.
Mm-hmm. Do we have any other comments? Uh, Harold, were you going to make a comment? I saw yes, Harold Dominguez.
I think we talked about that we were heading in this direction. I'm looking at Karen, and I think this is the first year that we're seeing where we talked about where we were moving, to your point on the outcomes. I'm trying to remember back, but that's what I thought we talked about, Karen.
Yeah, I think what I would add is that I think, so yeah, we did not include the outcome information last year. The timing didn't work out. We didn't have the 2020 outcomes to report when we were making recommendations for the 2021 funding. And we had also worked with trying to strengthen those outcomes. So we provided those in previous years. We did not provide those this past year. So we're working it, like you said, not perfect, but we're really trying to focus on outcomes, because that's really important to know how our investments are really paying off in terms of helping to change people's lives in the community. So it will be an ongoing process, I'm sure.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Just a quick question. Is staff asking us for a recommendation or on the outstanding amount that's still not allocated? The 100,000?
So what I would, Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmember Peck and Council, I think primarily tonight, what we are asking for is for council action on the recommended amounts for the agencies that is in your council packet. So that's what we're looking for, either approve those or ask or provide direction to modify those. I think what we wanted just to do at this point in time is to inform council that we do have this unallocated money. We are working through that, and we will bring back to council the recommendations sometime in the first quarter of 2022, what we are proposing to do with those funds, and then council can take action at that point in time, if that's acceptable.
Yes, thank you very much. As such, I will move the recommended allocations.
I'll second that. Okay, it's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, and I seconded that. Let's vote on the recommended allocations. All those in favor? Opposed? That passes 5-0, 5-0, unanimously. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Alberto.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Okay, we are now at the end of our agenda, really. It's the second final call for public invited to be heard. So it's time to call in now. The information is being displayed on the screen. Please mute the live stream and dial in now. We'll take a 5-minute break to give everyone time to dial in.
Mayor Peck, we are coming upon the 5-minute mark right now.
Okay.
I'm not seeing any callers right now.
I do know a couple of people that are trying to get in.
Gotcha. Would you like to give it another minute? We've been open, but I'm not seeing even anybody coming in or out.
Oh, okay.
Would you like to give it another?
Yes, let's give it another minute and see what happens.
Sounds good.
Hey, Don, can you try to get in?
That's what I'm doing, Harold.
I am seeing a caller. Dawn, is that you with 404 at the end?
That is not me, Dallas. So that is a real live caller.
Okay.
Let's hear what they have to say.
Okay, perfect. I will admit them and drop the screen. Okay.
Oh, I see 2 people now.
Yes, I see we have 2 people and actually a third just got in. So not sure what was happening there. Oh, one must have been Dawn. Okay. Number 427. Oh,
that was me, Dallas. Sorry.
Oh,
Dawn,
that
I
one
just
was
hung
you.
Up. That one was me.
Okay,
apologies.
we just lost 2 numbers, so I didn't get a chance to write down what those were, but we do have number 073, caller with the last 3 digits 073. Would you unmute yourself, please?
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Is
Yes,
that right?
we can hear you.
Okay. Shall I proceed?
Yes, would you please state your name and address?
Okay. I'm Nadine T. Lester. I live at 1517 Mayfield Lane in Longmont. Left Hand Creek runs behind my house. Good evening, Mayor Peck and Longmont City Council members. I'm calling in tonight to comment on the Rivertown annexation proposal. I hope you've all had time to look at ideas offered by Stand With Our St. Vrain Creek concerning this proposal. If not, I would be very glad to send you a copy. I hope you understand that the members of Stand With Our St. Vrain Creek are normal residents of Longmont without special interest, just real people who live around here. And yet, we know that as taxpayers, we are the ones who will pay for the infrastructure this proposal requires, including flood mitigation. We will suffer the traffic congestion when more than 3,000 vehicle trips per day are added to the overburdened roads in the area. And we are definitely the ones who will mourn the loss of wildlife habitat, which will come with development along the creek corridor, whether you ever look at birds and wildlife or not. That will happen. And you should know that many people who live in Longmont feel the same way we do about these facts. So thank you very much for your thoughtful consideration of comments from your constituency. I do support improving this property. And when I read the City Council communication about the annexation proposal and listened to your debate this evening, I felt that many of our concerns are being addressed, particularly the habitat and species assessments and evaluation of northern leopard frog populations. However, in Section C of the communication, the memo states, quote, the application proposes development compatible with surrounding properties in terms of land use, site, and building layout and design and access. Unfortunately, the explanatory paragraph below that says the residential portion would be a compatible neighbor to the St. Vrain Creek on the north and Rogers Grove Nature Area to the west, as these nature areas would provide a quiet and peaceful setting for the residential buildings. As Councilmember Rodriguez also noticed, this is completely backwards. The residential buildings will interfere with the quiet and peaceful setting of the nature areas on the north and Rogers Grove to the west. Let's speak the truth about development in general and this development in particular. It's been a pleasure to watch your civilized and congenial meeting this evening. Thank you so much for your thoughtful consideration of comments from the community.
Thank you, Nadine.
Okay, Mayor Peck, I do see we have one more caller.
Okay, let's bring him in.
Great. Caller with the last three numbers, 452. Can you unmute yourself? All right, we see you, caller 452.
Hi, I wasn't able to get on earlier. Sherry Malloy, 1632 Sherman Way, speaking to Rivertown. After the 2013 flood and the 500-year mitigation plan, a group of residents started Stand with our St. Vrain Creek to protect our corridor from damaging development. We are not alone. In 2018, we submitted 750 postcards asking council to codify protections in our development code. Longmont's customer survey found 74% rated protecting nature areas from development is very important. 800 acres of privately owned, undevelopable floodplain lands along our greenway have benefited from our tax dollars. With the massive public investment, $400 million and counting, these property owners and developers now want to capitalize on our investment. The Rivertown developer intends to do a blight study, which means still more public dollars will be used. St. Vrain Creek has tremendous ecological value. Portions are designated as critical wildlife habitat and identified as having immense conservation value. 90% of all wildlife depends on riparian areas for survival, so protecting habitat is essential. The biggest impact of the flood's damage and cost was on property. The land did okay. Open land actually helped keep the flood from being much worse. The worst damage was to homes, namely the completely wiped out mobile home park. St. Vrain has seen 11 floods. Despite the best mitigation efforts, this corridor will flood again. For the river not to respond to what's happening with climate change would break the law of physics. Putting people and property in harm's way is morally wrong and fiscally unwise. Rivertown is 21 acres immediately east of Rogers Grove and Fairgrounds Lake. The lake is home to an abundance of birds and other wildlife. Roger Jones donated 55 acres to our city so residents might always have a place to connect with nature, learn, and enjoy. That's a quote. There is nothing in the Rivertown proposal that suggests any respect for Rogers Grove, Fairgrounds Lake, or St. Vrain Creek, which share 50% of Rivertown's border. This proposal doesn't meet the required code requiring it be compatible with surrounding properties. Development in this corridor needs to be green-built, LEED certified with an abundance of native vegetation. Any development in this exceptional corridor should be exceptionally designed. The proposed high-density 320 residential units is way too high for this sensitive area. Development proposals should honor and enhance this special area, not exploit and overburden it. For property seeking annexation along our St. Vrain, it is prudent to apply a standard concerned with protecting the common good, which is not necessarily what's required from the planning commissioners. This additional common good lens must safeguard people's well-being and homes, reflect good stewardship of our public investment, and protect our riparian habitat and the wildlife it supports. This annexation agreement needs to include many common good and common sense protection provisions before being approved for second reading. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Is that, are those all the callers we have?
That's correct. There are no more callers.
Thank you. So now we are at the end of our meeting for the mayor and council comments. Council members, do you have any comments that you would like to make? Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez?
I just wanted to thank all the folks that came out to the Longmont Lights Parade on Saturday. It was very well attended. It was very beautiful. I saw a lot of things that I don't think I've ever seen at one of our Longmont Lights parades before. Some dancers with some very beautiful, costumes that were just fantastic. So thank you all for braving the wind and, a little bit of cold weather. And it's great to have that sense of community back again, even when we do it, hopefully in a safer and sociably distanced way. Thank you.
Thank you, Aren. Anyone else? I would like to say the same thing. I think I saw more people who attended this parade than I have in past years. But I also want to say that our Congressman Joe Neguse is going to be in Longmont December 20th at Las Palmeras restaurant at 5 o'clock. And he's very excited that Longmont's in his new CD too. And he would like, as he stated to me, to know more about Longmont and what we want from him, how he can help us, etc. So if you're interested, you can put that on your calendar. Merry Christmas and happy holidays to everyone. Be safe, wear your masks, and we'll see you next year. First of all, now we need city manager comments. Harold, do you have anything?
No comments, Mayor, Council.
City Attorney Eugene, are you still on? Do you have any comments?
Still on and no comments.
Thank you. Can we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. And I'll second that. All those in favor, raise your hand. Thank you. That passed unanimously. Have a safe holiday, everybody.